Most people drive Uber to pay for rent. Well, not me. Not anymore. I drop off haunted mirrors and pawn shops that shouldn't exist. The kind of shops that appear one night between a dry cleaner and a vape lounge and vanish by morning like they were never there. I drive vampires to blood orgies. I get paid in cash, cursed coins, enchanted jade, and sometimes things that breathe for a few hours before crumbling into dust. But I wasn't always the undead and occult go-to ride guy. I used to be normal. Well, as normal as you can be when you're grinding rideshare in the city that forgot to die. It started on a Tuesday. The night smelled like warm garbage and rain that never came. I was 3 cold brews deep, behind the wheel of an '07 Corolla with 230,000 miles and a personality like a tired camel. My shift had been the usual blend of bad music and worse human beings. A girl who cried about her ex for 23 minutes, a guy who tried to sell me Bitcoin, and someone who definitely pissed in my back seat and tipped me with a fist bump. I was about to call it a night when I got pinged for one last ride. The name on the request was Nico. Just that. No last name, no rating, no profile picture. Red Flag City. But it was a long ride with surge pricing, and I needed rent more than I needed my dignity. I pulled up outside this fancy old hotel downtown. The kind of building that had gargoyles on the corners and windows that looked like they'd seen some shit. And then he stepped out. Black suit, black gloves, black hair slicked back like he'd been styled by a mortician with a flair for drama. He didn't walk so much as glide, and he smelled like grave moss and high-end cologne, like if death got a subscription to GQ. He opened the door without asking if it was his ride, just got in and said, "Drive me to Lux. Don't take the interstate." I don't know why I didn't question it. Maybe it was the voice. Low, smooth, with an accent I couldn't place. Roman, European, cult leader chic? Whatever it was, I drove. Lux turned out to be one of those places you hear about but don't believe exists. An underground nightclub with no signage, guarded by 2 guys who looked like they bench press humans for fun. The kind of club that made the air taste like smoke and sin. The whole way there, the guy didn't say a word. Just stared out the window like he was watching something I couldn't see. Then, as I pulled up to the curb, he turned to me and smiled, and I saw them. The fangs. Subtle, but there. A glint of something wrong behind his lips. He handed me a wad of hundreds, at least $2,000, and he said, "For the ride," slipping the money through the divider. "And for your silence." Man, you can buy a lot of silence with this much money. He smiled wider. "Then I'll consider us friends." And then he was gone. Just like that, into the club, past the line, no ID check, no waiting. Like the night swallowed him. Now, a smarter man would have driven home, deleted the app, and maybe gone back to community college. But me? I sat there in my car for 10 minutes with a stack of cash in my lap and adrenaline in my throat, thinking about that smile and those eyes and the way the world had shifted just a little when he got in my car. I was back the next night, and the night after that. It took a week before he gave me his card. Black as ink. No writing except a symbol I didn't recognize, and a number etched in deep red foil. "Call if you want more," he said. I waited about another week, and then I called. The next ride wasn't to a club. It was to a place in the woods that didn't show up on GPS, down a gravel road that scraped the undercarriage of my car and nearly took off my muffler. I figured it was some kind of private party. Instead, I rolled up on what I can only describe as a rave for monsters. There were bonfires and music. but also things with wings and claws and glowing eyes, dancing and howling and chanting in languages that made my ears ring. I swear, one guy had antlers and was levitating. Another looked like he was made of smoke and teeth. No one even glanced at me, except Nico, who stepped out of the car like a king returning to court. He handed me another stack of cash before he vanished into the crowd. As he turned, he looked at me, and this time he didn't bother to hide his fangs. "You'll be hearing from me again." And I did. That was 3 years ago. Since then, I've delivered cursed mirrors, ancient relics, live beings, some sedated and some not, and once, a box that rattled and meowed and then exploded into moths. I don't ask questions. I don't touch the cargo. I get paid, usually in money, sometimes in blood opals or luck stones or coins that scream if you flip them too many times. I've got rules, hard ones. Never open a sealed package. Never cross through old church grounds. Always keep a line of salt across the dash. And if Nico calls, you always answer. Because Nico doesn't just run deliveries. He runs the entire supernatural underground in this city. Vampires, witches, cryptids, even a demon or two. They all answer to him, for the most part. And me? I'm his driver. It ain't glamorous, but it pays the bills. And I haven't been on a real date since 2021. And every now and then, it makes me feel like I'm part of something bigger. Something terrifying and ancient and just barely held together by words and whispered oaths. Besides, I've already seen too much to go back to Uber. The call this time came around 9, just as I was halfway through a burrito the size of my forearm and debating whether to watch horror movies or finally do laundry. My phone buzzed once. No name, just a symbol. An Ouroboros coiled around a crescent moon. That's Nico. I wiped hot sauce off my fingers and answered. "Sammy," he said. No hello, no small talk. Nico never wasted words unless they were in Latin and made people bleed. "What's up, Count Snackula?" A pause, then. "Come to the grounds. Use the north entrance. Don't bring garlic." He hung up. Classic Nico. His grounds weren't on Google Maps. You had to take an unlit back road past the city limits, through a tunnel that shows only when the moon's high and you're running low on gas. After that, you follow the moss-covered statues, winged, horned, and very anatomically correct, until the forest gave way to a stone path lined with wrought iron lanterns and flickering blue flame. It looked like a graveyard designed by a goth billionaire. The air was thick around here, like you had to push through it to move. I parked near the back, behind a row of hearses and one cherry red muscle car with antlers welded to the grill. The music hit me as I stepped out. Low pulsing bass, the kind that made your ribs vibrate and your soul consider alternate careers. The rave was in full swing. Supernaturals of all flavors drifted through Nico's courtyard like a living fever dream. There were vampires in velvet, witches with glowing tattoos, a man with a jackal's head smoking clove cigarettes, and something that looked like a spider and a woman had made a very bad decision together. No one looked twice at me. I was known here now. Human, yeah, but useful. And Nico's, so I was off limits. I made my way toward the manor, dodging a drunken satyr puking glitter into a fountain, when a wall of fur and breath stepped into my path. "Hey there, snack pack," a voice rumbled. She was 7 feet tall and shaped like the gym forgot to stop. Black leather, yellow eyes, and the kind of claws that meant she never paid for a bottle opener. A werewolf and female. Hungry in more ways than one. I gave her my best tired smile. Sorry, sweetheart, I'm off the menu. Strict diet. She leaned down and stiffed my neck, nostrils flaring. Smells like stress and secrets. I want me some of that. Yeah, well, I smell like it. Go away, I said, brushing past. She laughed, a low growl that probably worked on others, but didn't follow. Small victories. I was halfway to the front steps when I walked into temptation wrapped in silk and sin. She was lounging against the doorway like she'd been painted there. Dark hair, darker eyes, red lips, and legs that went on longer than most road trips. Her voice slid into my head like warm honey. You look tired, love. Come inside. Let me take the edge off. A succubus, of course. Her aura hit like an airbag. Pressure, heat. The sudden feeling that nothing in the world mattered more than her. My brain fogged. My feet stopped. I could almost hear her name, feel it on my tongue like a flavor I'd forgotten. One step. Just one. She held out a hand, fingers tipped in gold. And then... Enough. Nico's voice cracked through the air like a whip. The spell broke. I stumbled back, heart racing, head spinning like I'd been deep fried in lust and bad decisions. The succubus gave Nico a slow blink. You're no fun, darling. Find another human, he said. And that was that. She melted into the crowd, and I finally remembered how to breathe. Nico looked at me, pale as ever, dressed in a midnight suit with a red handkerchief and a face carved from old stone and better centuries. You have no resistance to charm, magic. She caught me off guard. Also, she had great presence. He didn't smile, but I caught a twitch at the corner of his mouth. Come, we have business. He led me through his manor. All dark wood and stone, candles flickering in sconces, walls lined with paintings that moved when you weren't looking. We passed a library, down to the study that smelled like old books and older blood. There, on a pedestal wrapped in iron chains and salt lines, sat the package. A box. Blackened iron. Runes carved deep into the surface like it had been branded by a god in a bad mood. It pulsed. Not with light or sound, but with weight. Like the air around it bent into submission. This is the Eye of Icarax, Nico said. He didn't touch it, just stared. Sounds fun. What's it do? Shoot lasers, make toast? Nico's eyes narrowed. It belonged to a dead god. One who judged entire civilizations with fire. This was his favorite relic. Favorite? Like a childhood teddy bear, or more like a personal weapon? A token of focus. The object through which he enacted his will. That shut me up. He turned to me, eyes hard. We're delivering it. Together. You drive, I ride. You? In the van? Yes. Something tells me this isn't just a courtesy call. Nico didn't answer right away. He walked to the window, watching the rave through stained glass. Something's stirring. Others are aware. The eye has resonance. It woke something up. Awesome, I said. So where are we taking it? Please don't say hell. Someplace old. A sanctuary. Amin-Sur's vault. Never heard of him. You wouldn't have. He makes sure of it. We left the house just as the party was peaking. Witches levitating, a trio of vampires slow dancing midair, a manticore vomiting on a taxidermy bear. Standard stuff. Out back, parked beneath the willow trees, sat my van. Now, look. After my 5th delivery ended with the banshee scream melting half my dashboard, I decided the old Corolla wasn't cutting it anymore. Once the money started flowing in, I upgraded. It's a 1965 Volkswagen microbus. Matte black, reinforced chassis, lead-lined interior, sigils carved into the undercarriage, and a glove compartment that locks itself when scared. It looks like if the Mystery Machine had a goth phase and started listening to doom metal. I opened the back, and Nico lifted the iron box like it weighed nothing and secured it in the center, anchoring it with chains I didn't ask about. Then he slid into the passenger seat. I paused at the driver's door, hand on the handle, and looked up at the sky. The moon was full. The wind had teeth. Somewhere in the trees, something screamed like it had been born wrong. "Great night for a drive," I muttered. Nico didn't respond. He just closed his eyes, as if listening for something only ancient monsters could hear. I started the engine. The van growled to life. We rolled out slow, headlights cutting through the night, and just before we hit the first curve, I said, "So, what's the over-under on us getting murdered before sunrise?" Nico cracked open one eye. 50-50. "Well, I guess I've had worse odds," I said, and we drove into the dark. We'd been on the road for about 45 minutes before I realized Nico hadn't said a single word since. That was fine by me. The guy wasn't exactly a bundle of joy to road trip with. The van rattled slightly, the chain-bound box in the back giving off a low hum I could almost feel in my teeth. I turned the radio on, just to break the tension, but all I got was static and the sound of what might have been something breathing too close on a mic. I turned it off again. Nico finally spoke when we passed a crooked mile marker on the side of the road, hand-carved, moss-covered, and definitely not put there by the Department of Transportation. "Slow down. There's a checkpoint ahead." "There's no cops out here," I said, but eased off the gas anyway. I didn't say cops. Sure enough, about a quarter mile up I saw it. Lights through the trees, flickering like candles. Then figures. 3 of them standing in the middle of the road. No signs, no signals, no weapons. Just standing there like they'd been waiting. And they had. "Witches," Nico said. "Friendly? We'll see." I brought the van to a slow stop. The engine clicked quietly as it cooled. Nico sat motionless, hands in his lap, calm. But the air around him thickened. If vampires had a battle mode, I could feel him shifting into it. The witches didn't move. 3 women all dressed in black, but not in the cliché witchy way. More like biker jackets, torn jeans, and boots that had seen more grave dirt than sidewalks. Their tattoos glowed faintly along their necks and arms. Runes, moon symbols, things that moved under the skin if you looked too long. The one in the middle stepped forward. Her hair was short and silver, and her eyes were the color of cigarette ash. "Sammy," she said, smiling like she remembered something funny. I blinked. "Lena?" I'd delivered a cursed amulet to her once. One of those jobs where the item cried blood and screamed when the box shook. She'd opened the crate without gloves, smiled like it was a birthday gift, and tipped me in a coin that never stayed in one place for long. I liked her, mostly. In the way you like a storm that passes without flattening your house. "You always did show up at the worst possible times." "And yet I'm still breathing." "For now." Nico opened his door, slow and measured, and stepped out like he descended from Olympus. Lena and her sisters tensed. Not obviously, but enough. "Nico, didn't expect you to be riding shotgun." "I didn't expect you to be out here playing highway patrol." She grinned. "Funny how life's full of surprises." The other 2 witches stood silent, but their eyes were on the van, more specifically on what was inside it. I could feel the pressure building like the atmosphere before a storm. The eye didn't make noise, didn't glow, didn't do anything flashy, but it was present, and they could sense it. Lena circled the front of the van, peering into the windshield and then back at me. "You're carrying something nasty in there, Sammy." "Yeah, well, rent's due." She cocked her head. "You even know what it is?" "Something old, something heavy, something Nico doesn't want me touching." "Smart of him," she said and turned to Nico. "We'll make this simple. Trade us the box. We'll take it somewhere safe, bury it where even the guys won't sniff it out, and you get to walk away." "No." That was all Nico said. No posturing, no threats, just no. Lena nodded like she'd expected that, then walked closer, boots crunching over gravel. "You sure you want to play it that way? Word's already out. You're not the only ones sniffing around tonight." "I can handle it." She looked at me then. This time the smile was gone. "You can't. You're a human caught between gods and monsters, and one of them's riding in your back seat." I almost said something. A joke, a deflection, but couldn't find it. She wasn't wrong. I was just a guy with a magic-proof van and a death wish. Lena exhaled, stepped back, and held up her hand. One of the witches handed her something. A bone, carved with runes tied with red twine. She tossed it to me, and I caught it reflexively. "A ward. Single use. If things get bad, really bad, break it. It'll blind whatever's chasing you for a few seconds. That's all I can give you." "Why help?" She looked past me and at Nico. "Because when he fails, I want someone to remember who tried to stop him." Then she turned, and the witches vanished into the trees like smoke on the wind. Back in the van, Nico didn't say anything for a while. Just sat there, eyes closed, breathing like a man trying not to lose control. Eventually, I cleared my throat. So, that went well. She won't stop us, but she is, right? Others are coming. Any idea who? Worse than witches. We rolled back onto the road, headlights cutting through the dark. The box behind us sat silent, but I could feel the world bending slightly around it. Not in a flashy, magical way, but in the way old things do, when they start waking up and remembering what they were meant to destroy. And ahead of us, the night was just getting started. The road out of the witch's territory was long, dark, and quiet. Not peaceful quiet, more like the kind you find in the back of a funeral home, where even the furniture seems to be holding its breath. Nico leaned his seat back slightly, one hand resting on the hilt of a blade hidden in his coat. He hadn't said much since we'd left Lena and her coven behind, which I was starting to suspect was his version of brooding. Or maybe he just really hated car rides. Me? I hate silence. "So," I said, glancing over at him, "you ever think about getting a motorcycle? I feel like you're the type." Nico arched an eyebrow. "I've ridden horses into battle. Motorcycles are noisy." "You literally live in a gothic rave castle and throw parties with bass solo that rearranges my organs. Noisy is your aesthetic." He smirked barely, then closed his eyes again. "Horses don't explode when shot, or veer into trees." "Okay, but do horses have cup holders?" That one got no reply. Just the faintest twitch of a smile at the corner of his mouth. I marked it as a win. I tapped the steering wheel. "So, the Eye of Icarax. Sounds like something from a really edgy metal album. You ever meet the guy?" Nico opened one eye. "Icarax wasn't a man. A bit of a god. He was fire and judgment incarnate. They say he could boil oceans just by opening his eyes." "Well, that's comforting." His worshippers burned themselves alive to gain his favor. Whole cities did it, voluntarily. I whistled. And this is his favorite trinket, huh? Can't imagine what his less important stuff looks like? A volcano that screams? A self-cooking dagger? Worse. I let that hang there for a moment. Seriously, though, I said, lowering my voice a bit. You think this thing's really that dangerous? He looked at me. Not dramatic or intense, just straight. Honest. If it ends up in the wrong hands, the body count won't stop at cities. It'll spread. So why not destroy it? If it could be destroyed, it wouldn't still be here. Okay, that's a fair point. We drove for a few more miles. I watched trees blur by, branches twitching in the breeze like they were whispering to each other. The roads were empty. Too empty. No headlights, no distant hum of traffic, not even roadkill. You know, you never told me how old you really are. You always dodge that one. Because the answer makes people uncomfortable. Try me. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I was born in Rome in 38 AD. Wait, you're Roman? Yes. Like sandals and togas Roman. Nico gave me a sideways glance. We didn't all wear togas. Shit, you're older than Britain. And wiser than most of it. I laughed a little too loud, then shook my head. You fought in wars? Dozens. Killed people? Thousands. Been in love? A pause. Once? We went quiet again. This time, though, not awkwardly. There was a weight to Nico that didn't always show unless you really looked. Like his eyes had seen too much and stopped trying to forget. So, why this gig? Courier of the creepy and cursed? Seems beneath a 2,000-year-old demigod. He didn't answer immediately. I figured he was ignoring me until he said, because I got tired of ruling. Power is a poison you drink until your reflection disappears. To him. Also, the hours are flexible. I snorted. And that's when the van stuttered. Not a mechanical failure, more like something pulled at it. Like gravity had hiccuped. What the? The headlights lit up behind us, then to the left, then to the right. A rumble shook the air, low, hungry, and close. Engines. Motorcycles. I glanced at the side mirror. 1, 2, 3, 7 of them. Riding close, their lights like angry eyes in the dark. They were fast, too fast, and they were gaining. Oh, hell no, I muttered, gripping the wheel. Nico sat up straight. Gray fangs. Just 2 words. Cold and flat. You know them? I asked, my fingers tightening around the steering wheel. They're werewolves. Old school, nomadic. They run in packs but ride like wolves. Fast, loud, territorial, and meaner than hell. I glanced in the mirror. They were closer now, 7 of them at least. All wearing studded leather jackets, helmets with bone spikes, or no helmets at all, and just snarling faces half shifted under the moonlight. One had a necklace made entirely of fingers. Another had glowing eyes and a jaw too wide, like his skull had popped out of alignment on purpose. What the hell do they want with us? They don't want us, they want the eye. Oh, right, the nuclear bomb in my backseat. Great. The road ahead twisted through the woods like a snake in heat. No lights, no signs, just trees pressing in on both sides. I pushed the gas, but the van wasn't made for racing. It rumbled and shook, the engine grumbling like it had arthritis. They shouldn't be here. Not this far east. Someone tipped them off. I didn't like the sound of that. One of the bikes gunned it and pulled up alongside the driver's side. I caught a glimpse of the rider. Shaved head, face painted like a skull. His mouth split in a too-wide grin full of gold fangs. He looked at me and mind slitting his throat. "Friendly bunch," I muttered, yanking the wheel slightly to nudge him off. He peeled away laughing. Another biker roared up behind us and chucked something. A chunk of metal wrapped in barbed wire. It bounced off the roof with a sick thud and rolled down the windshield, smearing it with some kind of black, sticky goo. "What the hell is that?" I asked. "Blood hex. Keep your windows shut." "Yeah, well, no shit." The van jolted as something heavy landed on the roof. Metal crumpled. The whole frame sagged like we'd picked up a moose. Then came the sound. Claws scraping down the sides, slow and deliberate, like nails on a chalkboard attached to a meat grinder. Nico pulled something from his coat. A short, curved blade with the handle made of bone and silver runes etched so deep they pulsed faintly in the moonlight. "Drive. Don't stop, no matter what." "What are you gonna do?" He kicked open the passenger side door, stood on the running boards like some kind of undead cowboy, and climbed onto the roof. "Oh, good grief. I don't get paid enough for this," I muttered, gripping the steering wheel tighter. Above me I heard snarling, then a crack, and the van shook hard to the left. Something, or someone, hit the ground behind us with a wet crunch. Then came another howl, shorter, more guttural, full of pain. The biker on my right tried to swerve into us. I countered, swinging the wheel and slamming him into a tree trunk just off the shoulder. He exploded off the bike like a rag doll wrapped in fur, and the bike careened off into the brush. Another wolf landed in front of us, right in the headlights. Not on a bike, but on foot. He sprinted across the road and tried to sideswipe the van, claws digging into the metal siding like it was tinfoil. "Get off!" I shouted, jerking the wheel. The van slid onto the gravel shoulder, throwing sparks as the tires bounced and caught. I barely kept it straight. The bastard clinging to the side screamed, half human, half beast, all teeth, and tried to punch through the window. Then, in a blink, his head disappeared in a blur of motion. Nico dropped back through the passenger door like he was stepping off an elevator. His coat was slashed, his shirt soaked in blood. Not all of it his, I hoped, and his eyes were glowing faintly like red coals. "You good?" I yelled, trying not to look directly at the claw marks on the windshield. "One of them clipped me with silver. It'll slow me down." "Cool, fantastic, love that for us." Behind us, the remaining bikers regrouped. I could see two of them fiddling with the chain between their bikes, stringing it across the road like a trap. Another one, larger than the others, wearing a vest with a blood-stained patch that read, "Pharaoh President," was gaining on us fast. Nico looked back. "If we hit that chain, we're done." "Yeah, I figured." I scanned the road. The trees pressed in, but there was a break just ahead. A narrow logging trail, barely wide enough for the van, but it might take us around. "Hold on," I muttered and yanked the wheel right. The van screamed in protest as we left the road and hit the dirt. Branches slapped the windows, mud flew. I could barely keep it steady as we bounced over roots and rocks. "They're following, but not all of them, just the fast ones." Why does that sound worse? Because the fast ones are the hunters. Of course they were. One of the bikers cut through the trees, launching off a fallen log like he'd done it 100 times already. He landed a few feet ahead of us, dismounted midair, and sprinted on all fours toward the windshield. "Duck!" I shouted. Nico opened the passenger side door and was on him instantly, faster than I could blink. He tackled the wolf mid-snarl, slamming him against the passenger door. The two of them rolled, fangs and claws and silver flashing, snarls and growls echoing inside the van like a war zone in a coffin. I couldn't help. I had to keep driving. Another biker appeared in the trees beside me, this one with glowing eyes and a jaw unhinged at inhuman angles. I rolled my window down and punched him with everything I had and screamed as something cracked in my wrist. He let go, howling, and fell behind as we hit a bump and the van lifted for a second, then slammed back to the earth. Behind me, Nico roared like some ancient predator, and the werewolf's cries were no more. A few seconds later, Nico opened the passenger side door while I was still driving and sat in the seat. I guess being a vampire has its pros, super speed and all. Silence. Just the rumble of the van and my ragged breathing. Nico slumped in the seat, blood soaking his coat. His arm was wrong, twisted and deep gashes sizzling. "You okay?" I asked, voice shaky. "I've been worse," he said, then closed his eyes. "But I'll need blood. Soon." I didn't ask whose. We drove for what was probably another dozen miles before the sounds of pursuit faded completely. The forest swallowed the noise, the tension, and the heat of the fight. Then I saw a crooked, hand-painted sign nailed to a tree. "Rest stop 1 mile." I looked at Nico. "We need to patch you up." "There's a safe house nearby. A friend." "Another friend like Lena?" He gave a faint smile. "Let's hope this one's in a good mood." We found the safe house at the end of an unmarked gravel path tucked behind a rusted-out diner that looked like it hadn't served coffee since disco died. The rest stop 1 mile sign was a lie. More like 3 miles of potholes and paranoia before the tree line gave way to a clearing marked by a crooked fence made of bones. Literal bones, human probably. Looked like some still had wedding rings. "Cozy," I muttered, as I parked the van just outside the perimeter. Nico didn't respond. He sat stiff in the passenger seat, jaw clenched, face pale even for him. The silver wounds along his side were worse now, puckered black veins spidering out from under his ruined coat. He hadn't said a word since the last stretch of road, which was how I knew he was hurt and bad. And that scared the shit out of me. I killed the engine and helped him out. He tried to wave me off, but nearly collapsed after the second step. I caught him. The air around the safe house was thick with the smell of moss and incense and something sweeter, like sugar and rot mixed together. The building itself was an old 2-story farmhouse, paint peeled away, the shutters hanging like broken wings. But beneath the decay, I felt it. A presence. I knocked once on the warped front door. A few seconds later it opened. The witch on the other side was tall, maybe 6 feet, with dark brown skin and eyes that flickered like candlelight. Her hair was twisted into coils that defied gravity, and her long coat looked stitched from crow feathers and thorns. She leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, looking us both over like we were stray dogs. "You're bleeding on my welcome, Matt," she said. Nico coughed, black blood and thick. "Sister of Lena?" The witch nodded once. "Mara, 3rd seat in the coven." "We need shelter. And blood." Mara raised an eyebrow. "Do I look like a Red Cross van?" "Call it a favor. Tell Lena it's for the good of the balance." Mara studied him for another beat, then stepped aside. "Fine, but if you bleed out on my floor, I'm keeping your coat." Inside smelled like herbs, firewood, and rain-soaked stone. Everything was dim and flickering. No light bulbs, just candles burning in bottles and skulls. The walls were lined with jars full of things I didn't want to look at too closely. A taxidermied bird turned its head to follow me as we walked through the hall. Mara guided Nico to a carved wooden chair in front of a low-burning hearth. He sat, trembling slightly. Sweat, or something like it, beaded on his forehead. "I'll get blood," she said, already walking. I stood awkwardly beside him, unsure what to do. "You all right?" "I've had worse," he muttered. but his voice was dim and thin. Mara returned with a glass goblet filled to the brim with blood so dark it looked like oil. Nico took it with both hands and drank it in slow, hungry gulps. His throat worked with each swallow. Some color returned to his face, but not enough. And still, the wounds didn't close. Mara noticed it too. She crouched beside him, tilting his chin with a hand tipped in silver rings. "You've fed, but you're not healing," she said, frowning. Nico said nothing. "Let me see," she said. He hesitated, then peeled back the torn fabric of his shirt. The gashes across his ribs were deep, inflamed, and wrong. The skin around them pulsed with a faint, sickly light. "That's not silver poisoning, that's a curse." "A werewolf clawed him. That means something?" She turned to me, surprised I spoke. "Most don't, but yes. Some werewolf packs use cursed claws dipped in hex ink and filled with blood rites. It's not designed to kill quickly." I looked at Nico. "What?" Nico looked paler than usual. His jaw tightened. "Can you fix it?" "I can undo it, but not without cost." "Money's not a problem," I said quickly. Mara smiled, showing her white teeth with a little too much gum. "Oh, honey, you're in a witch's house. We don't take PayPal." She stood, walked to a cabinet, and began pulling herbs and vials and bones from glass jars. Her voice floated over her shoulder. "My coven will claim a favor, a standing debt, one that can be called in at any time, one that cannot be refused." Nico didn't blink. "Done." "Just like that?" I asked. He glanced at me. "We don't have time to bargain, and you can't drive this thing alone." Fair enough. Mara laid out a ritual circle of salt, iron nails, and black candles. She used a needle to draw blood from Nico's palm, muttered words in a language that made the flames bend sideways, and poured a green liquid over the wounds that hissed and smoked like acid. Nico screamed. It wasn't loud, but it was raw. The air thickened. The flames danced violently. The wound on his ribs began to knit closed, the black veins retreating. Mara swayed slightly as she finished, sweat on her brow. "It's done." Nico's breathing slowed. He flexed his hand, skin whole again. "You'll be back to strength by nightfall. Until then, avoid sunlight and idiots." "Noted," he said, glancing at me. "Hey, still in the room?" "And you, driver?" "Sammy." She raised her eyebrows. "Take care tonight. Tell Lena I held up my end. Your favor's marked." "I'll remember," Nico said, slowly rising. We stepped back into the night, the air colder now. The forest didn't feel as if it was watching. But it didn't feel safe either. Nico climbed into the van, slower this time, but there was strength in him again. "You good?" I asked, starting the engine. "Better, but the clock's ticking." "Yeah, so what now?" "Now we finish it." The road narrowed the further we drove, from paved to cracked asphalt to dirt and finally to something that barely qualified as a trail. Trees pressed in close, branches like arms, roots rising up like knuckles. The van creaked with every bump, the headlights catching flashes of worn stones, twisted symbols, and bones tangled in roots. Nico hadn't spoken in 20 minutes. He stared out the window with that 1,000-yard stare, or 2,000-year stare, like he wasn't just watching trees, but remembering things he hadn't tried to think about in centuries. "Feels like we're driving into a place that doesn't want to be found," I said. "It doesn't. That's the point. I let the silence stretch. Still, if you're trying to hide the most dangerous artifact on the planet, building your vault in the Appalachian Hills seems low-key. This isn't Appalachia anymore. Not really. We crossed the threshold 10 miles ago. That wasn't a metaphor. Not with him, not tonight. Eventually the van couldn't go any further. The trail ended at a wall of stone, moss-covered and cracked with no path forward. Just a crooked wooden sign half-rotted into the ground, burned into a single word in a language that made my head hurt to read. "This is it," Nico said, stepping out of the van. I followed, the cold hitting like a slap. The trees behind us didn't look the same anymore. Thicker, older, and wrong. Nico popped the back of the van. The eye sat in his iron box, still chained, still pulsing like it had a heartbeat of its own. He lifted it without a sound. It didn't seem heavy in his hands, but the air around him sank like gravity had just changed his mind. We left the van behind. The hike wasn't long, maybe a mile, if that, but every step felt like we were walking backward through time. The trail was barely there, marked only by faint etchings in the rock and low cairns made from bones bleached by centuries. My flashlight didn't help. The beam flickered even with new batteries, and when I tried my phone, it just wouldn't turn on. Eventually, the trees gave way to a clearing of stone. The vault was waiting. It wasn't a building. It was the mountain itself, cracked open by impossible hands. A vertical fissure, perfectly symmetrical, framed by statues half swallowed with age. Carvings covered the walls, spiraling inward, not decorative, instructional. Stories told in a language of geometry and pain. I didn't need to be told not to speak. The place didn't want words, it wanted reverence. Nico stepped forward, still holding the eye, and knelt before the vault. He placed the box in a hollow in the rock, just the right size, shaped like a wound. Then the world went still, and something moved. Not from the sky, not from the woods, from within. The stones shifted, not outwards, but inward, like the mountain was inhaling. The air turned dense. Every bone in my body felt it. A shape emerged. Not a creature, not a person. More like a shadow carved into the stone, pulling forward, massive, faceless, and slow. Mansur. He didn't have eyes or arms or a mouth. Just a hulking outline of stone and ancient godhood, etched with runes too deep for time to erode. He spoke. "The eye returns." Nico bowed his head. "We kept it from those who would abuse it. You delayed the fire. That is enough." I stood there, feeling about as significant as a raindrop on a tombstone. Then something unexpected happened. The pressure shifted and focused on me. A presence wrapped around my mind, not crushing it, just aware. I could feel Mansur looking through me. Not my memories, not my thoughts, just the shape of me. My place in the universe. My willingness to carry something I didn't understand. "You chose the burden when you could have run." I wanted to speak, but my throat locked up. Mansur raised one stone hand, not formed, but suggested like an idea being made flesh, and opened it. There in the center of the palm lay a ring. Silver gray, ancient in design. Smooth but inscribed on the inside was a single rune that flared to life the moment I looked at it. The stone set into the band wasn't a gem. It was bone, white, polished, and cold. "You have no oath, no magic, no mark." The ring floated into the air and hovered in front of me. "This will shield you against curses, against flame, against the cruel bending of will. For as long as you walk the balance." I reached out slowly and took it. The moment my skin touched the band, a ripple passed through me. Like a door had been shut behind me that I hadn't seen. I slid it onto my finger and it fit perfectly. Amensur said no more. The vault sealed itself, the eye gone, entombed in a place where even nightmares needed permission to enter. The pressure lifted. Nico and I sat alone in the clearing once more. The mountain was just a mountain again. Did that feel like a reward or a warning? With Amensur? Probably both. We turned back to the woods and walked. The walk back to the van felt longer than the walk in. Maybe it was the weight of what we'd left behind. Or maybe the path was reshaping itself now that the eye was sealed away. Either way, I didn't talk. Nico didn't either. The forest had gone quiet. Like everything around us knew something big had just been buried and didn't want to wake it back up. We reached the clearing where the van sat waiting, paint scraped, tires mud-slicked, a claw mark still etched into the passenger door like a bad tattoo. It looked tired and so did we. Nico sat on the front bumper and lit a cigarette. The old kind. Hand-rolled, smelling of clove and iron. He took a long drag. "So," I said finally, "that thing, Amensur, he's what? A god? A vault keeper? The universe's meanest librarian?" "All of the above. He's not a god in the way most people use the word. He's an old truth. One of the gods decided to stay buried when the others fought for followers. And the eye?" He flicked ash onto the dirt. "A piece of Icarax. His focus, his fury. That artifact wasn't just dangerous. It was him in a way. His will, his hunger. All wrapped in metal and waiting." I looked down at the ring on my finger, still cool to the touch, still heavy with meaning. "And now it's locked up." I sat beside him, stretching out my legs. My muscles ached. My brain was a blender full of weird symbols and god-mountain vibrations. "Why didn't you tell me how bad this was?" He took another drag. "Would you have still come?" "Yeah, but I would have packed more snacks." That earned the faintest smile. "Seriously, though, I'm just a guy with a van. You've got witches and blood contracts and vampire muscle. Why me?" Nico was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because you're not part of the game." "What game?" "The power game. Everyone out here, witches, shifters, even some of the gods, they're all jockeying for position. You're human, mortal. I wanted to see how well I could trust you." I let that sit for a while. The sun was starting to creep through the trees, bleeding soft light into the clearing. We climbed into the van. As I turned the key, the engine groaned. Then it settled into a purr like it knew we'd made it through something. The forest parted just enough to show us the way back. I took one last look at the mountain behind us. By the time we hit the edge of the city, the sun was up and mean, low in the sky but sharp enough to sting. I reached for my sunglasses and kept one hand on the wheel, the other brushing the ring on my finger like it might start vibrating. Nico hadn't said much since the vault. He was in the back of the van, the darkest part, laid out flat across the floor between duffel bags, backup ammo, and a dead god's shadow. I'd raked blackout curtains in the rear windows for nights like this. Or mornings like this, I guess. The highway turned to industrial zones, then to back roads, then to the winding asphalt that led towards Nico's place. The kind of road you only find if you already know it's there. I slowed as I reached the unmarked driveway, punching in a code on a keypad buried in a fake rock. The steel gate opened like the mouth of a bunker. Nico's house sat on top of a forested hill, sleek and silent, a strange mix of old stone and modern black glass. But I didn't pull up front. I took the left turn around the side, winding down into the hill itself, until we reached the underground garage. The doors opened as we approached, motion triggered, climate controlled and windowless. Perfect for someone who bursts into flames on contact with daylight. I parked in the bay closest to the inner door, killed the engine and got out. My back cracked. My head throbbed. I opened the side door and looked in at Nico. "You good?" I asked. He sat up slowly. His skin had gone from ghost pale to corpse gray. He looked like something unfinished but alive. "I'll manage," he said, voice low. I didn't offer to help. I knew better. He moved on his own, slow and stiff but steady, disappearing through the interior door that led into the house. It sealed behind him with a soft hiss. Just like that, he was gone. I leaned against the van and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The garage was silent, still, cold, but not unpleasant. I stayed there for a minute, just to clear my head. The ring on my finger felt heavier now. Not in a magical way, just in a real way. Like a reminder. Eventually, I climbed back in the driver's seat and pulled out, retracing my route through the hidden roads. The sun was higher now, and the world looked too normal for everything that had just happened. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a guy who'd driven a bomb into the woods and hoped it didn't go off in his lap. I rolled through downtown, then out toward my side of the city. Low buildings, empty streets, laundromats still closed. I pulled into a diner parking lot like I liked. Not the food, which was garbage, but for the quiet. I sat there a minute, engine ticking, caffeine long burned off. Eventually, I said it out loud, just to hear it. Whew, that was a lot. No one answered. I sat there a little longer, watching the sunlight creep across the dashboard, slow and harmless from inside the tinted glass. The ring caught a sliver of it and didn't flinch. Neither did I. I looked into the back seat. A stack of cash was waiting there. Nico really gave me the hookup this time. I picked it up. Looked to be at least 10,000 at a glance. Then again, I did have to make some pretty big repairs to the van. The job pays well. The job is dangerous. And for better or for worse, I am the guy they call to drive the night shift. Hey everybody, Kevin from Nightmares Nightly here. If you made it this far, I want to thank you for listening. I love bringing these stories to life, and I've recently been writing a lot of my own. If you'd like to support the channel and what I do, and hear more of my own stories, please consider becoming a member, where I try to upload exclusive, ad-free stories every week. And as always, thanks for listening, everybody. Most people get phone calls, and sometimes I do, but this time I got summoned. It wasn't a ring or a ping or a cheery "you up" text. Nico's calls don't show up on your screen. One moment you're brushing your teeth and scrolling through memes, the next your front door is open, there's a folded card on your kitchen table that you're sure wasn't there a second ago, and it just says, "Drive now." So I did. Nico's mansion is about 40 minutes outside the city if you're obeying traffic laws. I wasn't. I took the back roads, rolled up with my headlights off, and parked outside the wrought iron gate with the same nerves I had the first time I visited. It's the kind of place that makes you feel like the building itself is watching you. Tall stone spires, dead ivy crawling up the walls, and these awful cherub statues flanking the entrance that look more like baby gargoyles and cute Renaissance child. The gates opened on their own. They always do. Never once have I seen a butler or a servant, but things happen around here. Doors open, hallways light up, things clean themselves. Old Roman magic or undead Roomba, I don't ask. I parked next to Nico's obsidian blackjack in the driveway, which looked freshly waxed despite the fact that it hadn't moved in weeks. The house loomed above me like a Gothic painting with money. The front door swung open as I approached. I stepped into the cold air of the foyer, already smelling incense, blood, and some cologne that probably hadn't been sold since Julius Caesar was alive. And there he was, standing at the top of the staircase like Dracula's cooler older brother, wearing a black three-piece suit, with shirt unbuttoned just enough to show the faint scar of an execution from centuries ago. "Samuel," Nico said, voice like smooth steel. "You're late." "I'm 10 minutes early." "Which is 10 minutes later than I prefer." Same old Nico. He gestured for me to follow. We didn't talk as we moved through the long hallways lined with oil paintings of battles I'm pretty sure were never in history books. There was the faint feeling that the walls were closer behind you than when you started. Eventually, we reached the sitting room, or what I call the library for people who've outlived time. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a fireplace that crackled with no visible wood, and a single glass case at the center, empty now, but once it held a heart that wouldn't stop beating. Long story. He motioned toward the leather chair across from him. I flopped into it. He poured 2 glasses of something red and ancient. I didn't ask what. "So," I said, taking the glass, "what horror am I to chauffeur today? A haunted mirror? A demon with a travel phobia? A warlock who doesn't tip?" Nico sipped and smiled, those canines just a little too sharp for comfort. "Something far more delicate and far more dangerous." "Great. Love delicate. Always ends with a concussion and a ruined shirt." He rose and walked to a locked drawer, pulling out a small, lead-lined briefcase. No markings, but the second he opened it, I felt it. Pressure, like the air in the room took a step forward. Inside was a scroll, no bigger than a foot long, wrapped in red thread, tied with a knot that pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. The material wasn't paper or cloth. It shimmered like wet silk, but with weight. "This is the contract of tears." I didn't touch it. He continued, "It's an artifact made from soul cloth. Do you know what that is?" I'm guessing not the newest drop from Supreme." He ignored me. "Soul cloth is woven from the remnants of promises, vows, betrayals, threads of memory and regret, usually used for binding spells, but this is different. It's a contract, a truce between 2 bloodlines that have been at war since the 1940s. He didn't have much to say. I already knew. "Cutter Vale, Red Howl." Nico nodded. "And Seraphine Moreau." Of course. The Vampire Ice Queen and the Werewolf Biker King. If the Hatfields and McCoys were supernatural crime lords with centuries of vendettas and body counts, it'd be them. "They agreed to this?" I asked. "With conditions. The contract must be signed at neutral ground, and once signed, delivered to an arbiter for sealing." Who's the arbiter? Not your concern, Sammy. Just get it there. Once delivered, the truce becomes binding. Breaking it invokes consequences. What kind? He looked at me in that way he does when he's deciding whether I need to know the truth or just enough to get through the night. The kind that ends dynasties. I leaned back and took another sip. Sounds fun. So, where's this handshake happening? Nico smiled. A place you've never been. Papa Stix's. That name felt heavy, like it echoed even though no one else was in the room. You're sending me to Papa Stix? Doesn't he eat liars for breakfast? He enforces neutrality. It's the last truly balanced ground in the city. Both Seraphine and Cutter agreed to meet there. You'll bring the contract. They'll sign. And then you'll drive it to the Arbiter before anything goes wrong. And when exactly does something not go wrong? He raised his glass. That, Sammy, is why you get paid. I exhaled, feeling the weight of it already. The scroll was wrapped in a thick velvet pouch, layered in binding sigils that looked like they were written in salt and scorched ash. It rested in the passenger seat of my van like a sleeping animal, harmless if you left it alone, dangerous if you poked it too hard. I didn't poke. I just drove. Midnight was in full swing. The roads were quiet in that way that only the city's supernatural zones ever are. Too quiet. I was heading to Papa Stix's, and even though Nico had assured me it was perfectly secure, my gut was already tightening like a fist in my stomach. The route Nico gave wasn't on any map. I followed broken roads that didn't exist until I drove on them, past streetlights that flickered to life only when I neared, and alleys that curved into themselves like the city was folding in to keep me hidden. The scroll pulsed faintly in the seat beside me, like it had a heartbeat I wasn't supposed to hear. I was 3 blocks from the edge of the known city when I caught it. Just a shimmer in the rearview mirror. Movement and fast. I slowed, shifted in my seat. My fingers hovered near the controls I'd rigged into the dash. These weren't buttons you'd find in a normal van. I made quite a few modifications since my last delivery with Nico to an ancient god. These buttons were things built from jobs gone wrong, from advice given by witches and cash paid to exorcists and one very helpful goblin who worked in car audio systems. The shimmer came again, closer now. No lights, no engines. Just something riding the wind like a bad thought. Then I heard it. The grind of claws against pavement, and the low, guttural rumble of a growl too deep to be human. Gray fangs. I flipped a switch. The van's undercarriage thrummed as holy oil sprayers came online. I hit another button. Headlights surged to full beam, laced with glamour-breaking incantations etched into the bowls by a blind enchanter. Everything in front of me lit up like a crime scene, and that's when I saw them. 3 motorcycles, matte black, rimless wheels, tires wrapped in barbed chain. Their riders weren't human. Not anymore. Twisted werebeasts, hulking and pale beneath patchy leather and cracked helmets. Their eyes glowed yellow under the light. One had a machete strapped to his back. Another carried what looked like a morning star forged out of a mailbox and a demon spine. They pulled up on either side of me, flanking me with grins full of broken teeth. The lead rider raised a gloved fist, signaling something behind me. I glanced in the mirror. Shit. A 4th bike. No rider, just a shape wrapped in smoke. A silhouette riding nothing. Its limbs too long, its mouth sewn shut with silver wire. It wasn't a werewolf. It wasn't anything natural. This was demon muscle bought and paid for. The Grey Fangs were pulling out all the stops. I floored it. The van roared to life. Micro-burst enchantments firing under the hood. My little upgrade from Mara after the last time someone tried to hijack me mid-run. The van lurched forward like a cannonball, tires screaming, enchantments holding the frame together like duct tape on a prayer. The Grey Fangs gave chase immediately. They were fast. Faster than I expected. The leader, biker with the machete, lashed out with a chain from his wrist, trying to hook the back of the van. I flipped the second switch on the dash. The van coughed out a mist of grave dust and blessed silver filings. The chain hit it and let out a wail like it was alive. The rider swerved, howling as the dust burned through his gauntlet. I skidded around a corner and took a shortcut through an old rail yard that hadn't been used in 40 years. Rusted train cars, empty cargo containers, spirits of broken transit hung in the air like cobwebs. It was the kind of place you only found if you were lost, or if the city wanted you to be found. The two remaining bikers kept pace. One of them left off his ride mid-chase, claws digging into the roof of my van. I felt the metal bend, heard him snarling. I flipped the interior mirror to arcane and saw a pair of glowing yellow eyes leering through the windshield, upside down, drooling. I hit the brakes and the van dipped hard. The rider flew forward, smashed into the hood, rolled off, and hit the pavement in a blur of fur and rage. Then the demon caught up. It didn't ride so much as glide, feet dragging like dead weight, smoke trailing behind it like steam off a brand new corpse. I slammed into the rear of the van with enough force to lift the back wheels. The van groaned but held steady, barely. I reached for the third switch, my oh shit lever. Two rods slid out from either side of the bumper, crackling with runes. One slammed into a fire hydrant, spraying water laced with saint's blood across the alley. The demon shrieked like it had been set on fire, which, in fairness, it probably had. If I could just make it to Papa Styx's, the demons and werewolves would have to call off the attack, lest they take on the wrath of the voodoo priest. I whipped the van around the last corner before Papa Styx's, door sigils glowing like brake lights made of runes, and barreled straight toward a wall. Except it wasn't. At the last second it shimmered, peeled open like a curtain made of fog, and I shot through it. The moment the van crossed the threshold, everything changed. Silence, cold, peace. The outside noise vanished, the street disappeared, and I found myself in a massive subterranean chamber, bathed in red light and candle smoke. The sound of jazz drifted up from below, live saxophone low and slow. I rolled the van to a stop, engine hissing, smoke curling from the grill. I sat there for a second, panting, sweat cold on my neck, hands shaking. Then a voice came from outside the driver's window. "Oh, my friend, now that was a hell of an entrance," the man said. He was tall, dressed in a white linen suit that didn't have a single wrinkle, despite the humidity of the underground chamber. Skin like carved onyx, eyes glowing faint blue, and a cane in his hand that looked like it was carved from bone. "Mr. Samuel, welcome to my bar." I exhaled, reached for the velvet pouch, and opened the van door. "Papa Styx, you wouldn't happen to serve whiskey, would you?" He grinned, white teeth sharp against his obsidian skin. "Oh, we serve peace first. But yeah, we got to the whiskey." He tapped the top of his cane against the ground once, and the space around us shifted. Not like a door opening, not like a room turning. It was more like reality rearranged itself to make room for us. The garage I'd pulled into was gone. Now I stood at the threshold of something older than the city above it. The bar was carved into the bones of the earth itself. Huge ribcage-like arches of dark stone running along the ceiling, lit by lanterns filled with floating embers that never touched the glass. Vines of glowing blue fungus crept along the walls. Smoke curled lazily through the air, dancing in patterns that didn't seem entirely bound by gravity. The air buzzed with old magic. Not the glittery kind, Not the Hollywood fireball bullshit. This was power that smelled like molasses and grave soil, like rusted coins in the breath before a curse. "This way," Papa Stick said, leading me past a line of velvet ropes. Beyond them, the place opened up like a fever dream cocktail lounge meets paranormal embassy. And to my left, a table of witches playing cards with animated hands floating above the deck, each movement accompanied by a flicker of green fire. One of them looked up at me and winked, a third eye on her forehead blinking sideways. And to my right, a pair of succubi lounged across a black velvet couch, sipping from fluted glasses filled with something far too red and too thick to be wine. One locked eyes with me and smiled. My skin itched where her gaze landed. I looked away fast. A warlock with silver-streaked dreadlocks danced slow with a siren in a dress made of liquid shadow. Her voice, even in soft humming, made me feel like I should be drowning somewhere. I clenched my teeth and kept walking. In the back corner, a vampire in an immaculate white tux was playing a piano that had no keys, just bone stubs that sounded like crystal bells. Each note sent pulses through the floor like heartbeats. And all around the bar were subtle signs of boundaries, sigils carved into the walls, candles set in a very specific geometric shape, chalk lines too straight to be drawn by hand. This wasn't just aesthetic. It was architecture built to hold power in place. Papa Stick's moved like smoke, smooth and unhurried. He tapped his cane now and then, not for support, but to direct the energy of the space. People parted when he approached, even the ones who looked like they hadn't feared anything in centuries. "You see all of this, Sammy," he said, his voice a honey-thick drawl with the weight of thunder behind it. "This here is balance. This is war dressed up and drinking. This is where enemies meet and leave alive, because I say so." "Not that I don't love the ambience," I said, "but what keeps everyone from throwing chairs the second the tequila runs dry?" Papa Sticks smiled as we passed a cluster of ghouls huddled around a hookah exhaling glowing mist. "Respect. Rules. Fear. Don't matter how old you are or what blood you drink. Everyone bleeds. And I make sure every creature who steps into this house remembers that." He guided me down a hallway that curved like a nautilus shell. The walls shifted color as we moved, paintings that blinked, mirrors that didn't reflect what was in front of them. "No blood gets spilled in Papa Sticks's. That's the deal. Been the deal since before the court piece, since before the council fell. And anyone who breaks that rule, they answer to me." I noticed now that the cane he carried wasn't just carved bone. It was a femur, a human, scrimshawed with symbols that writhed faintly under my gaze. The top was capped with a gold-plated sheath, a serpent biting its own tail. "I don't like the violence. I prefer order, parley, negotiation. But if someone tests my domain, I take their name, not metaphorically. I strip the name out of existence. They walk the world forgotten, unrecognized, like a ghost wearing their own skin." "Subtle," I muttered. "Effective," he countered. He stopped at a heavy blackwood door covered in carvings. Each one was an icon I didn't recognize. Spirals, animals, eyes in sets of 4. They pulsed softly in sequence like the door itself was breathing. "This is where the signing will happen. Neutral ground sealed in triple oath. Once before parties arrive, you bring that scroll inside and place it on the table. You don't talk unless I tell you to. You don't even blink too loud, you feel me? Loud and clear. He turned to face me fully. The playfulness in his voice was gone now. What remained was old power, measured, ancient, and watchful. Samuel, I let monsters in here because I know their rules, their blood, their stories. You ain't got blood magic. You ain't a wolf, you ain't a corpse in a suit. You're human. And that makes you vulnerable. You saying I should have stayed home? I'm saying once this thing is in motion, you're the thread that keeps it from unraveling. Seraphine and Cutter hate each other. They'd snap each other's necks for looking crooked if I weren't the one pouring the drinks. But they both agreed to sign. That means something. And you're the one trusted to carry the damn scroll. I swallowed. The weight of the pouch in my coat pocket felt heavier suddenly. Papa Stick stepped aside and motioned toward the door. They'll be here soon. You've got 5 minutes to breathe. After that, we walk into history. I looked past him, into the dark wood of the door and the silence behind it. For a moment, I wondered how the hell I'd gone from ride-sharing for extra cash to holding a peace treaty that could end decades of supernatural war. And then I remembered the truth of my job. I drive the night shift, and sometimes the night drives back. The room was circular and windowless, lit by a chandelier of hanging bones that clicked softly when no one was speaking. The table at the center looked like it had been carved from a single piece of stone. Atop it, a black silk runner stretched across the center, embroidered with silver runes I couldn't read but somehow understood. No weapons, no lies, no blood. I sat on the edge of the silence, pacing like a guy trying not to pace. The velvet pouch holding the contract of tears lay in the center of the table, untouched, pulsing faintly like a heart refusing to die. The air shifted. Papa Sticks didn't announce the arrivals. He didn't need to. First through the doorway came Seraphine Moreau. She moved like poured mercury, tall, pale, all elegance and cold fire. Her hair was pulled back into a braid so sharp it could have slit a throat. She wore a fitted black coat with silver buckles and boots that didn't make a sound. No jewelry, no makeup. Just 2 eyes the color of a dying star, and the kind of presence that made the room feel colder as she entered it. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Papa Sticks. She looked straight at the scroll. "Is it real?" she asked, her voice smooth and faintly accented, like French dipped in blood. "It's real," Papa Sticks said, stepping up beside her. "Good." She moved to the far side of the table and stood still. Didn't sit. Statues don't sit. The air shifted again, this time louder, more like a storm breaking through a crack in the wall. Cutter Vale entered like he'd kicked the damn door open, which he hadn't, but the way his shoulders filled the space made it feel that way. Leather vest, scarred arms, tank top that had seen better wars. He looked like a biker who'd bench-pressed a bear and then made the bear ride shotgun. His beard was wild, but his eyes? Sharp, intelligent, and dangerous. "Smells like rot in here," he said, sniffing the air. "You bring me here to get fancy with the leech's sticks." Papa Sticks' face didn't change. "I brought you here to end a war." Cutter saw the scroll, then his gaze slid to Seraphine. She still hadn't moved. They stared at each other. No words. 10 seconds passed, then 20, then 30. The silence was so thick I could hear my pulse in my ears. And then Cutter grinned. "Bitch still hasn't learned to say hi." Seraphine's eyes flicked to him. "Hello, dog." That's when I started slowly inching toward the wall, just in case. Papa Sticks stepped between them. Let's get to it. He nodded at me. I swallowed and stepped forward, unwrapping the pouch and placing the scroll on the table. The moment it touched the silk runner, the runes flared faintly. The scroll pulsed once. The threads around it glimmered like veins of lava. I need a signature. Blood or mark, doesn't really matter. Once it's signed, I drive it to the arbiter, and the deal becomes binding. There was a pause. Not hesitation. Calculation. Seraphine stepped forward, her boots silent on the stone floor, her eyes never leaving Cutter. "I'll ride with him," she said. Cutter let out a dry, barking laugh. "Ah, that's rich." She didn't blink. "I'm not risking the contract falling into ash because some mutt has a tantrum in traffic." Cutter's face twisted. Just a flicker at first, but I saw the temperature drop. Not in the room, but in him. "You think I'm gonna blow the deal? You think I came here to his house just to waste everyone's time?" "You've broken pacts before. Your kind's loyalty changes with the moon." He clenched his jaw. "And your kinds break the second you get hungry." "You already smell like a threat, Vale." "And you already smell like a trap." They stood face to face now. One dressed like a royal executioner, the other like a biker who just rolled out of a bar fight he didn't lose. And me? I was somewhere between them, holding a damned soul-bound death scroll, wondering if I'd survive the next 30 seconds. Papa Styx's voice slid in like a blade. "Enough, the both of you." Seraphine raised her chin but stepped back half a foot. Cutter didn't. He turned slightly, his hands curled into fists, the shoulders hunched, and his lips twitched and his voice dropped into a growl that sounded like it had claws. "You think I'll let her ride with this thing alone and do what? Whisper to it? Exit behind my back? No way. If she rides, I ride." "No one said you couldn't," Seraphine said. That did it. Cutter moved fast. Not a full transformation, but his spine popped once, and his forearms bulged. Fingers stretched, cracked, claws just beginning to push through skin. He didn't charge, didn't roar, but the intent was there. It radiated off of him in waves. Heat, violence, and the raw promise of blood. I backed up toward the wall, clutching the scroll. Crack. Papa Styx slammed his cane down and the world shifted. The room lit up like lightning had struck inside it. A circle of pure white fire erupted from beneath his feet, casting shadows that didn't match our bodies. Thunder cracked sharp and deep, shaking the stones. Cutter froze mid-breath, eyes wide, the glow of fury still bleeding from his pupils. Papa Styx didn't shout. He didn't need to. "This house is sacred ground. It has stood through betrayals older than both of your bloodlines. It has hosted demons, angels, gods, and worse. You want to bring my wrath upon you and your bloodline, Cutter?" The silence that followed had teeth. Cutter's pulse throbbed in his neck like a war drum, but slowly, very slowly, his claws retracted. The rage dulled in his shoulders. He let out a breath that came out halfway between a sigh and a snarl. He said nothing. Papa Styx stepped forward, tapping the cane lightly against the floor. The fire faded. The thunder ebbed. But the weight of his presence didn't. "You ride together. You do not fight. You do not sabotage. You don't so much as glare too long without my permission. This contract rides with Sammy. That means you protect the driver. You good with that, Samuel?" I nodded once. I mean, yeah. It's not like I haven't had violent exes in the same vehicle before. No one laughed. Fair enough. Papa Sticks stepped forward, and with a flick of his fingers, the scroll unrolled itself across the table. The soul cloth shimmered, lines of ancient ink glowing faintly in pulses, like the contract itself was breathing and waiting. He produced a dagger from inside his jacket, short, curved, and carved from bone. He placed it gently between the two war-born monsters like he was setting down a child. Sign. Make it in blood. Seraphine didn't hesitate. She drew the dagger toward her, pricked the tip of her finger, and pressed it against the parchment. Where her blood touched, the ink pulsed red and then sank into the fibers like it had been thirsty. Cutter followed, wordless, rough. He sliced his palm, then pressed it to the space beside hers. The parchment quivered under the contract, like it recognized war and demanded its price. As soon as both signatures settled, the scroll snapped closed of its own accord. The velvet pouch lifted slightly, drawing it in like a magnet, and sealed tight with a whispering sound, like 1,000 voices exhaling all at once. The pact was signed. Now, it had to be delivered. And that was the dangerous part. Cutter finally spoke, his voice rough. We ride. Seraphine simply gave a faint nod. Papa Sticks stepped back toward the table, giving the scroll one last glance. Then we begin. The moment that contract leaves my walls, the protections end. No more rules, no more sanctuary. The next step takes you through the wild. You break faith now, and not even I will be able to stop what follows. I looked at them both, the wolf and the queen, and me, just a human in a van built for hell. Time to hit the road. The van's side doors slid open with a creak that was way too cheerful for the mood. I was already in the driver's seat, engine humming with that familiar low growl that only came after a full demon oil tune-up. The contract of tears sat sealed inside a reinforced glove box that could survive a hellmouth rupture. Not that I wanted to test it. Cutter ducked in first, his broad frame taking up half the bench seat by the sheer presence alone. Seraphine followed, more glide than step, like gravity bent slightly to keep her pristine. She sat opposite him, silent, arms crossed, expression unreadable behind half-lidded eyes. They didn't speak. I slid the van into gear and pulled it up Papa Sticks' underground driveway, the city folding back into view like we'd been teleported behind enemy lines. The moment we were on the move, I cleared my throat. So, quick thing before we get too comfy. I was ambushed. No reaction. Earlier, on my way here, Grey Fangs. Brought some demon backup. Not the casual kind either. The stitched together, rides a ghost bike, screams in Latin kind. That got Cutter's attention. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, grinning like a dog catching a scent of blood. Seriously? You didn't mention that inside. Yeah, I didn't really want to interrupt the whole peace talks, maybe murder vibe we had going. Seraphine turned to me, eyes narrowing. And did they follow you? If they did, they hit the wards and got erased. Papa Sticks runs a tight door policy. Cutter whistled low. You took him on? Alone? I nodded. Van held up. I may be human, but I've got a few tricks of my own. Cutter sat back, arms crossed, looking impressed. You're not just a ride. Looks like you've got teeth, kid. More like fangs I borrowed from a few pissed-off warlocks and one really paranoid goblin mechanic, I said. But sure, let's go with that. Seraphine spoke again, this time softer. If they knew you had the contract, they'll come again. They will, but now we've got 2 VIPs in the back seat, so no pressure. The van turned onto an older road outside the city, a stretch of cracked asphalt with no cell towers, no cameras, and absolutely no reason to exist on a normal GPS. I'm not losing this scroll. They want it. They'll bleed. And you? I asked Seraphine. She glanced at the glove box. We protect the contract. We deliver it. We survive. I exhaled, knuckles tightening around the wheel. Cool, so we're all on the same page. Don't die. It got quiet after that. The three of us sat in that kind of silence that feels like it's listening. I could feel the tension pinging between Cutter and Seraphine like static before a storm. Any moment it could break, but they were holding it together. Barely. I turned the dial on the radio. Soft jazz buzzed through the speakers, then cut to static, then back to silence. Figures. The road narrowed. Old trees rising up like ribs around the blacktop. The sky turned purple with early dawn. Somewhere in the woods, something screamed. Cutter leaned closer to the partition. So, got anything else in this tank you didn't mention? I smirked. I've got silver netting behind the seats, reinforced sigil panels under the floor, a flamethrower rig mounted in the grill, and a null magic shock charge in case something decides to warp inside. You've been busy, Seraphine said. Deadlines are a hell of a motivator. Cutter laughed. If this courier gig ever tanks, you can make a killing running war buses for me. Noted. We rounded a bend and the trees got thicker. I squinted into the road ahead. Something wasn't right. That's when the shadows moved. I slammed the brakes just before we crossed a bridge. In front of us, blocking the path, were 6 figures. 3 werewolves in tattered gray fang leathers, and 3 demons that looked like they'd been stitched together from fire and regret. The wolves snarled and cracked their necks. The demons hissed in unison, their eyes glowing with violet fire. Well, there goes the quiet ride. Time to stretch. Seraphine opened the side door without a sound and floated out like a shadow cast backward. Her boots didn't touch the ground until she was already 10 feet from the van. I hit a switch on the dash. The back panels dropped, revealing a mounted rack of enchanted weapons and anti-creature defenses. Cutter grabbed 2 spiked gauntlets from the wall and slid them on like old gloves. Sammy, keep the van in one piece. I'll do my best, I said, throwing the gear shift into neutral and reaching for the emergency rune lock. The moment Seraphine moved, it was like the world had just slowed down for her. She flickered into motion, a blur of black and pale light. The first demon didn't even scream before its head was separated from its body, the flames inside it sputtering out like a candle. Cutter charged in after her, a wall of muscle and claws. One of the werewolves lunged and caught Cutter in midair, slammed it into the pavement, and roared. His back twisted, bones reshaping, his body swelling with raw power. Not fully transformed, yet, but enough to make the other 2 wolves backpedal. One demon tried to flank him. Bad call. Cutter turned mid-motion and choked it with a gauntleted fist, sending it spinning into a tree with enough force to shatter bark and bone. The tree exploded. The van shook, and I watched from the side mirror. Seraphine's coat flared as she leapt 30 feet straight up, flipped midair, and drove both boot heels into a demon's chest from above, cracking its ribcage and pinning it to the earth. That's when the howling started. More gray fangs. 4, 5, 6 maybe? I turned the key in the ignition, punched the rune lock, and pulled out a detonator. The road was too tight to drive through, but I didn't have to drive through. I backed the van up 20 feet, punched the code into the dash, and said, "Cutter, move!" He peeled off, dragging a wounded wolf with him, and Seraphine blurred to the tree line. I hit the button. The flamethrower mounted in the grill activated with a roar, sending a wave of burning light across the road. It caught 2 wolves mid-sprint, their fur igniting like kindling. Screams tore through the trees. Cutter tackled one from behind, breaking its spine. Seraphine grabbed the last demon by the jaw and whispered something in a language that made my ears ring, even from all the way over here. The demon imploded, folding into itself and vanishing into a burst of ash. Smoke filled the air, bodies littered the forest floor, and silence returned. Cutter limped back to the van, blood on his fists, grinning like he'd just come out of a bar brawl. A hell of a first stop. Seraphine climbed back in, pale as ice but untouched. I opened the glove box, checked the scroll, still pulsing, still sealed. "They're not going to stop," I said. "No," Seraphine agreed, "but neither will we." Cutter looked at me, then at her. For once, he didn't look like he was about to rip her throat out. "We keep the kid alive. Get the scroll to the Arbiter." I fired up the van again and pulled out onto the road. Next stop, ruin or peace. And with the two most dangerous beings I'd ever met riding behind me, the road was about to get real dark. The sky hung low and thick with clouds the color of rotted parchment. We were far beyond the reach of streetlights now, deep in the bone-white back roads that only showed up on maps drawn in blood and whispered about in exorcist confessionals. The van rattled over cracked pavement, tires humming a low, jittery rhythm, as I kept one hand on the wheel and the other hovering over the dashboard's defense grid. Cutter and Seraphine sat in the back like statues made of old war stories and bad decisions. Neither of them had said a word since the last fight, and honestly, I was grateful. The air in the van was already thick with tension, and I didn't need a philosophical throwdown between Fur and Fang while dodging infernal road hazards. The first sign of trouble came when the road blinked ahead. Not disappeared, not turned, it blinked, like it flinched from view and snapped back into existence. The trees on either side shifted too, leaning in, curling like they were eavesdropping. "Did anyone else see?" "Yes," Seraphine said before I could finish. Cutter snorted. "Magical interference. Someone screwing with the terrain." I eased my foot off the gas. "Is that normal?" "Only if they're trying to funnel us into a trap." Cutter craned his neck. "Let's spring it." And then the road simply wasn't there anymore. The van jerked forward as the blacktop beneath us vanished and dropped us onto hard-packed dirt covered in ruins so old they looked fossilized. Trees closed in around us like they were being pulled on wires. I swerved, dodging low-hanging limbs that bent too deliberately. The lights on the dashboard flickered. A high-pitched whining filled the cab. "They're warping the path. This wasn't on the route Nico gave me. It's a snare, meant to corral, not kill." "Why not just kill us?" "Because they need the scroll intact." Lucky us. Then came the ambush. A skeletal tree snapped in half ahead and out spilled a pack of gray fangs. A full half-dozen of them fully shifted and foaming at the mouth. Behind them came 3 more of the demon mercenaries, glowing with internal embers and barbed with molten chainmail. They didn't wait. 2 wolves launched at the van. I yanked the wheel and hit the side deflector sigils. The van's left panel surged with blue light, and the wolves bounced off in midair like flies off a bug zapper. Cutter was already out the side door, not even bothering to speak. He hit the ground running and collided with the first werewolf like a wrecking ball. Their bodies rolled in a snarl of fur and blood, claws slashing wild. Seraphine didn't use the door. She phased through the top of the van, leaping into the air like a bullet from a coffin. Turns out vampires had quite a few more powers than I originally thought. She landed on one of the demons mid-incantation, driving her heel into its chest with such force its body cratered into the earth. Her coat flared, the silver buckles gleaming as she spun and sliced through another demon's throat with a blade that had never once reflected her face. I triggered the van's perimeter wards. A pulse of protective force rippled out from the tires, knocking back the attackers just long enough for me to open the side compartment and grab a flare gun loaded with anti-possession phosphorus. Cutter was in full beast mode now, towering, snarling, half wolf, half tank. He grabbed one of the gray fangs by the leg and swung it like a bat into another, sending both flying through a ring of warped trees. Blood sprayed, bones cracked, and Cutter laughed. "This is fun," he shouted. I stopped the van and climbed on top of it, scanning the battlefield. One demon was pulling itself back together, literally knitting its torso back from severed flesh. I took aim with the gun and fired. The flare hit it dead center and exploded into a burst of holy fire. The demon screeched, its body flailing as light erupted from every crack in its form. Then it went still. Seraphine landed beside me, eyes glowing faint silver. "You're bleeding." "Yeah, that's kind of the theme tonight." A howl rose behind us. Cutter was surrounded now, 3 wolves circling him, snarling and waiting for a misstep. "He's playing with them," Seraphine muttered. She was right. Cutter bared his teeth. "Come on, mutts. Let's see if your pack still remembers how to fight." They lunged. He dropped low, caught one mid-jump, and used its momentum to swing it into the second. The third tried to flank him, only to catch a clawed elbow to the jaw that knocked it out cold. Cutter stood over the pile of broken beasts, panting, grinning, dripping with their blood. "Good dogs," Cutter growled. The road shifted again. The runes under the dirt flared orange, then crumbled into dust. The cursed path was breaking down. Whatever spell had warped it was unraveling. Seraphine landed lightly back in the van. Cutter climbed in after her, knuckles raw, eyes wild. "You still with us, driver?" I dropped back into my seat. "Yeah, and we're running out of surprises." I floored it. We tore through the collapsing magic path, trees peeling away like they were trying to escape us. Ahead I saw a faint glow. The road to the Arbiter had finally begun, and nothing short of the apocalypse was going to stop us now. We tore down the unraveling road, smoke peeling off the trees behind us like we'd lit the forest's lungs on fire. The mist ahead coiled low and thick, refusing to lift. The Arbiter's sanctuary shimmered somewhere beyond it, too distant to see, too close to feel safe. Then it hit. The air went wrong. It thickened, grew dense and heavy like we were driving underwater. Every sound muffled, every light dimmed. The van's engine coughed once, then growled like it didn't like what we were driving into. "They're here," Seraphine said, voice sharp. Cutter bared his teeth. "Bring it." I didn't even have time to respond before it hit us. Literally. Something slammed into the back of the van with enough force to lift the tires. The whole thing bucked and groaned, metal screaming like it wanted out of its own body. I yanked the wheel to stay on the road, just as another shape vaulted out of the dark. Werewolf. Not just any werewolf, though. The Gray Fangs again and their alpha. Full pack, reinforced, pissed off, coming in hard and fast. 3 leapt onto the van at once, claws screeching across the roof, jaws snapping inches from the windshield. Cutter was already moving. He kicked open the side door and dove out mid-turn, rolling into a sprint before he hit the dirt. The wolves followed. Snarls echoed in the dark. I caught flashes in the rear view. Fur, fangs, and Cutter's body slamming into a gray fang like a meteor made of meat and rage. Blood sprayed and bone crunched. Another shape dropped onto the hood. A demon, tall and thin, skin like obsidian stretched over glass. Its mouth opened, dislocating like a snake's, and it hissed something in a language that tried to pull my brain inside out. "Not today, asshole," I said. I flipped the windshield ward switch. The runes etched into the glass lit up in a cascade of fire-red script, and the demon shrieked as it lit up like a bonfire, flailing as it melted down the side of the van in oily chunks. Seraphine vanished. 1 second she was beside me, The next, she was out the shattered passenger side window, launching into the night like a shadow with a vendetta. I heard the whoomph of impact, then a scream cut short. More wolves poured in from the tree line. I slammed the brake and pulled a hard spin, kicking the back end around to scatter them. The van roared like a beast. Metal crashed against fur and bone as I clipped a gray fang square in the chest. It cartwheeled off the cliffside, howling all the way down. Cutter was in full transformation now, towering, upright, claws as long as daggers. He tore through 2 wolves at once, slamming one into the ground and ripping the other off his back like it was made of paper. His roar shook the air. Seraphine blurred through the battlefield, leaving trails of light like she was slicing through the dark itself. She didn't kill with brute strength. She killed with precision, one cut at a time, one flash of silver, one less threat. Then the mercenaries arrived. 6 demons bigger than the others, armor fused to skin, blades for hands. One carried a chain censer that leaked green smoke thick enough to rot. They formed a half circle ahead of me on the road. One raised its blade arm and pointed at the van. "Surrender the contract," it said, its voice like nails in a rusted pipe. I flicked the center console. "Sammy, what are you—" The runes under the van lit up. The underbelly's shockwave was a last resort weapon. Goblin tech. Illegal in 12 dimensions, but it worked. I hit the trigger. The van jumped 2 feet into the air as a pulse of concussive force blasted outward in a perfect circle, flattening the trees, the road, and everything within 20 feet. The front line of demons was obliterated, their armor cracked, their bodies hurled like rag dolls into the dark. Seraphine and Cutter weren't in the blast zone. I gunned it through the smoke before the demons could begin to retake their shape. In the rear view, Cutter howled. Seraphine moved like lightning. More wolves tried to close the gap, but she blurred past them, beheading one in a flash of motion so fast I wasn't sure it happened until the body dropped. Cutter leapt back into the van as we hit the ridge. He was covered in blood and none of it was his. "Where's Seraphine?" "She'll catch up." And she did. Right as the road narrowed, she landed on the roof mid-jump, her fingers punching through the metal to hold steady. The van rocked under her weight, but I kept the wheel straight. Then came the boss. From the woods rose a figure too tall to be a man, but too solid to be spirit. The alpha of the Grey Fangs, wrapped in ancient pelts and ritual scars, eyes glowing like furnaces. He stepped onto the road and growled a name. "Sammy." I almost pissed myself. "Trinova won't have much of a pack after tonight with what he's done," Cutter said. "Run his ass over, Sammy boy." I hit the gas. The van barreled towards him. He didn't move. I could see the muscles in his arms tense, the way his claws curled. He meant to stop us, physically. Cutter grabbed the wheel. "Brace." The van hit the alpha like a bullet hitting a mountain. He didn't go down, but he stumbled, arms spread, catching the front end as sparks flew. The whole frame bounced. Then Seraphine dropped off the roof and slammed her sword straight through his collarbone. He roared, not in pain, but in fury. "Go! Drive!" I hit the nitro rune. The van surged forward, throwing the alpha off the hood and onto the road. Seraphine blurred back in through the rear door. The last I saw in the mirror was the alpha rising again, bleeding and laughing. Next time, driver." I didn't answer. The mist ahead thickened, then parted. A golden archway formed from starlight and stone. The road beneath it went flat, smooth, and utterly quiet. The sanctuary. We'd made it. The Arbiter's domain waited ahead. The van sputtered once, then I turned it off, allowing it a moment of reprieve. I opened the door. It didn't creak. Cutter and Seraphine stepped out behind me without a word. They didn't argue, didn't stare each other down. Whatever grudges they still carried, they stayed holstered. You didn't brawl in the shadow of judgment. Ahead of us, the path rose. A long obsidian walkway, polished like wet glass and flanked by stone braziers with flame that cast no heat and even less light. At the far end stood the structure, a cathedral built for no religion, towering and wrong in its angles, ribbed with bones and basalt. A door waited at the top of the steps, 12 feet tall, made of what looked like pressed ash and teeth. I held the scroll. It pulsed in my hand, not with life, but with presence, like it knew it was almost home, ready to complete its mission. We walked. Cutter said nothing, his claws still crusted with demon blood. He looked calm now, eerily so, like the weight of violence had finally slid off of his shoulders. Seraphine walked like she had her own gravity. The faint burn of sigils flickered beneath her collarbone, reacting to the air. Her expression hadn't changed once since we arrived. Not fear, not reverence, just pure focus. We reached the steps. No one told us what to do. No guards, no emissary. Just the sense that to hesitate would be to invite judgment upon ourselves. So we climbed. At the top, the doors opened on their own, parting without sound. The chamber beyond was massive and empty. Shaped like an hourglass turned sideways, was an altar made of obsidian bone in the center. No throne, no figure. Only presence. The Arbiter didn't speak. It didn't appear. It simply was. A presence that filled the chamber like liquid gravity, pushing against your ribs and your thoughts and your name. It made my skin crawl and my teeth itch. It knew everything I'd ever done and had no opinion on any of it. It didn't care. I stepped forward and placed the contract of tears on the altar. The scroll unraveled itself midair, spreading wide, shimmering like stretched parchment made of smoke and breath. Symbols pulsed and rearranged. Language older than sin lit the room. Then came the voice. It wasn't a voice like Nico's or Papa Styx's or even the demons we'd fought. The voice didn't vibrate the air, it vibrated me. My bones and my blood. It filled the chamber and etched itself into memory like it had always been there waiting to be heard. Witnesses. Bound parties. Approach. Cutter stepped forward first, then Seraphine. They stood opposite each other, eyes locked, not with malice, but now with purpose. Speak your vow. Cutter's voice came low and steady. Cutter Vale, Alpha of Bloodstone Hollow. I offer truce. My strength no longer bears down on the Nightborn. My claws remain clean, for as long as theirs stay sheathed. Seraphine's voice followed, cool and clear as frost. Seraphine of House Vire, I accept the truce. My kin shall not feed on or kill your kind, so long as your teeth remain turned from our throats. The scroll lit up, flames crawling across its edges without burning, marking the vow into permanence. The pact is sealed. A gust of pressure rippled outward. Violation invokes wrath, said the Arbiter. And that was it. No ceremony, no applause. Just the cold snap of reality shifting. The scroll curled closed, its work complete. It vanished in a flicker of light and pressure absorbed into the Arbiter's will itself. The air thinned. The weight lifted. We breathed again. Cutter stepped back first. Seraphine didn't follow. She held her grounds a few seconds longer, staring at him. Not a challenge, not suspicion, but something closer to curiosity. You meant it, she said quietly. Cutter cracked his knuckles. Don't waste my time with politics. This pact keeps my people alive. That's all I care about. No, it's not, she said. He didn't respond, he just turned away. They walked out together, not in step, but not at odds. Something had changed. Maybe not trust, but the beginning of it. I followed them outside. We didn't talk much on the way back. Cutter climbed in first, folding his bruised frame into the back bench like a war dog off duty. Seraphine followed, silent and sharp-eyed, her boots leaving streaks of blood and dust on the floor mat. I turned the key. This time the van started without protest, and we rolled off into the dark like nothing had happened. Back at Papa Stix's, neither of them said goodbye. Cutter gave me a nod that probably counted as affection in his world. Seraphine gave me a glance, cool, unreadable, and stepped into the shadows. Papa Stix told me I was welcome to come back to his bar anytime I wanted. That sat pretty cool with me. Nico's mansion loomed quiet under the starless sky. He met me at the door, still in that tailored suit that never seemed to wrinkle, sipping something red and expensive out of a crystal glass. How'd it go? No one died, so weirdly smooth? He handed me an envelope, thick and sealed with wax. For the road, Sammy. That was it. No handshake, no toast, just a nod, and the door shut behind me. I didn't count the money until I got home. 25 grand, and tucked inside the stack was a single note. For the damage to the van, and any wards or magic that needs to be replaced. Nico. This job doesn't come with glory. No trophies, no thanks. Just blood on the tires, and enough nightmares to keep therapy interesting. But damn if it doesn't pay. And tomorrow? Oh, how the night shift calls again. Hey everybody, Kevin from Nightmares Nightly here. If you made it this far, I want to thank you for listening. I love bringing these stories to life, and I've recently been writing a lot of my own. If you'd like to support the channel and what I do, and hear more of my own stories, please consider becoming a member, where I try to upload exclusive, ad-free stories every week. And as always, thanks for listening, everybody. Nico's parties always made me feel poor. The mansion was wrapped in old stone and old money. Torches burned along the drive, not for light but for effect. Out front, cars worth more than my entire life were lined up in a neat row, guarded by gargoyles that weren't just decorations. Inside, the place was packed. Vampires in tailored suits moved through the room with drinks in hand and no breath in their chests. Witches in hoodies and boots lounged on velvet couches, the sigils glowing faintly on bare arms and throats. A couple of low-level demons stood behind the bar in human skins with slick smiles, bound by contracts I could see tattooed around their wrists. A few wares hung near the walls, relaxed but never off-duty. Something fey watched from the staircase, eyes too bright, not touching anything. I'd put on my best shirt and cleanest jeans, and still felt like the only one in the room who ever had checked a bank balance. One of Nico's younger vamps passed me and gave me a nod. "Driver?" "Undead," I answered. He grinned and moved on. I grabbed a glass from a passing tray and tried not to think too hard about what was in it. The music was low, expensive jazz, and people talked in 6 languages around me all at once. You could taste the power in the air. Not the cheesy, glowing kind, but the kind that signed old packs and buried bodies where zoning didn't reach. "Oi, hey, Sammy!" I turned. One of Nico's house staff, technically a ghoul, functionally a major dormo, stood there with a glass of dark red wine. "Aw, you cleaned up nice. Hit about the truce run. Contract of tears." "Yeah, that was a good time. 10 out of 10. I would almost die again." You keep doing jobs like that, you're gonna end up with your name in the wrong books. That already happened when I took out my first credit card. He moved on. I took a drink. It burned. Across the room I spotted Cutter. He leaned against a stone column, big frame relaxed, a bottle dangling from his hand. He laughed too loud at something a witch said, then made a face at the drink and finished it anyway. He wore a leather vest over a faded shirt, scars visible along his forearm. He looked comfortable, which meant he was on edge. Wolves never turned it all the way off. In one corner, a cluster of witches stood in a tight knot. No theatrics, just low voices and quick glances toward the ceiling now and then, as if they were checking something only they could see. Their faces were tense, not just party faces. Something pressed against the back of my neck. Not a hand, but a feeling heavy and present. Samuel? Nico stood at my shoulder, close enough that most people would have jumped. I'd gotten used to it, mostly. He wore black, as always. Suit, shirt, tie. No one else made black look that precise. His skin held that faint chill it always did. His eyes took in the room and then settled on me. Walk with me. That's never ominous, I answered, but I went. We moved through the crowd. People parted for him without thinking. Conversations dipped until he passed, then resumed. Vampires noticed everything, but the old ones carried their own weather. Nico was a storm under control. He led me down a side hall and through a door into a study. The noise of the party dulled behind us. This room was quieter, darker, lined with shelves, old books, and older weapons. He closed the door. The locker clicked on its own. I sat in a chair. He crossed to a cabinet built into the wall and opened it with a key that didn't look like metal. Relaxed, are we? Not tonight. He pulled out a small, heavy lockbox and set it on the table between us. Wards pulsed along the edges, simple and ugly, built for function. My teeth buzzed when I leaned closer. He opened it. Inside sat a single glass vial, no bigger than my finger, locked in a padded groove. The liquid inside was thick and dark. It did not gleam. It drank the light around it. Every few seconds it pulsed, once, steady and slow. What am I looking at? Blood. From a dead god. We're doing that now, huh? This god dealt in thresholds, endings, and gates. When it died, its blood did not cool, it condensed. It can empower rituals tied to doors between worlds. He closed the box halfway, enough that I couldn't stare straight at it anymore. The buzzing in my teeth eased. There are 3 vials of this blood in the city right now. One in demon hands, one in the coffers of the coven, and one here. How did demons get one? I did not give it to them. They stole it years ago and paid for that mistake at the time. But they kept the blood. They've grown bolder lately. Someone down below is whispering in their ears. They are gathering in numbers they have not had in a long time. And the witches? The coven knows the demons intend to open a gate. They intend to use their vial and this one to stop them. He tapped the box. 2 vials combined in the right hands can close a rift and reinforce the walls for decades. 2 vials in the wrong hands can pull something very old and very angry through. So, we're in a race. The demons have one, the witches have one, and you have the tiebreaker. He nodded. So, why am I here? Why don't the witches come get it from your fancy god blood box? Because they don't trust themselves. I looked at him. He went on. The High Priestess cannot touch this. Her power is tied to blood and fate. If she comes too near the god's blood, demons will feel her from across oceans. They will react hard and quickly. And the rest of them? Some of them are loyal, some of them are hungry. Power draws hands. Give this vial to the wrong witch, and we do not get a sealing ritual, we get a coup. Or worse. So they trust me more than they trust themselves. Okay? They don't trust you. They trust that you do not want what is in this box. You want to survive, get paid, and go home. That makes you more reliable. Flattering. He closed the box and slid it toward me. You will take this to the Coven Sanctum tonight, and they will use it with their own vial to shut down whatever the demons are building. The demons will try to stop you, but they must not succeed. Why don't you take it? Or send one of your heavy hitters, Seraphine, or what's really starting to hate how normal this felt. Nico's garage was quiet when we walked in. The party noise faded behind us once the door shut, and all that was left was the sound of my boots on concrete and the low-tick garage door rolled up. Cold night air spilled in, carrying the smell of the city and something under it that felt wrong. I climbed in, placed the box in the custom steel cradle built into the floor between the front seats, and locked it in. My ring on my hand buzzed. "Seatbelt," I said. Cutter snorted but clicked it. We pulled out of the garage and through the open gate, leaving the safe, thick boards of Nico's land behind. The difference hit fast. On Nico's grounds, the night felt contained. Out here it stretched. The street lights ahead of us flickered when we passed under them, one after another, as if something brushed across their wiring. Shadows along the sidewalk sat deeper than they should have, clinging to alley mouths and doorways. The woman in the sedan to our right drummed her fingers on the steering wheel, but the rhythm never changed. The guy in the truck behind us stared ahead without blinking. "Cutter?" I said. "Yeah, something ain't right." The man in the delivery van got out and walked towards us. Step, step, step. No hurry, no threat in the posture. His face was blank until he got close enough that the street light caught his eyes. They were too dark, in color and in depth, as if something sat behind them and pressed forward just under the surface. He stopped a few feet from the hood and smiled. "Evening." Cutter's hand went to the handle of the door. I rolled the window down an inch. "You lost?" He looked at me, then looked past me, then looked at the floor where the box sat locked in place. "We don't want you." The voice was calm, careful. "We want what you're carrying." His mouth moved, but something else spoke through it. "Yeah, that's a shame, 'cause it's not up for grabs." From the corner of my eye, I saw movement. The woman in the sedan turned her head in the same slow arc. The guy in the truck behind us leaned forward in his seat, 3 sets of wrong eyes fixed on the van. "Samuel?" the thing in the driver said, and that name out of that voice made my hands tighten. "This ain't gotta be messy. Hand over the case and walk away, and we won't pursue you." Cutter unbuckled his belt, cracked his neck, and pushed the door open. "You'll have to take it off of us. Come on." The man's eyes shifted to Cutter. His smile didn't change. The woman in the sedan got out. The guy from the truck followed. They moved in sync, same posture, same tilt of the head. Possessed, all 3 of them. I put the van in gear and kept my foot on the brake. I could feel the wards humming onto the floor. Cutter stepped in front of the hood, shoulders rolling, muscles shifting under his shirt. "You want a wolf? Come and get one." The thing in the delivery driver tilted his head slightly, studying him. "So eager. You'll cut nicely." The 3 hosts moved at once. The woman went for the passenger side. The truck driver headed for the back door. The delivery man stepped toward Cutter. They didn't talk. Cutter met him halfway. He hit the driver in the chest with both hands, hard enough to knock him back against the hood of his own van. The man laughed, even as his ribs snapped. Fingers curled against Cutter's wrist, stronger than they should have been. "Don't kill the bodies, they're just meat suits." "I know," Cutter growled. The woman reached for the passenger handle. I jerked the van forward a few feet. Her hand scraped the metal instead of finding the latch. I spun the wheel and angled the van so that none of them had a straight path to the box. The driver slammed a fist against the rear door and metal groaned. I flicked the first ward switch. The outer panels lit in a thin line, and the next blow bounced off of them in a crack of ward energy. The driver snarled, voice gone too deep, eyes burning faint orange for a second. Cutter's fingers dug into the delivery man's chest as he dragged the demon forward. "Get out of him," Cutter said. The man's face twisted, skin straining. For a moment, a shape pressed outward under the surface as if something inside was trying to decide whether it wanted to leave or break the skin open wide. I put the van into drive, then reverse, then drive again in quick pulses, bumping the sedan and the truck just enough to keep the host off balance without crushing them. Horns blared on the cross street. Someone shouted from a window. "Last chance! Hand it over! This is a courtesy," the thing in the woman's body said. "When demons start talking about courtesy, it's time to go." I slammed the gas. The van lurched forward. The man on the hood had to let go of Cutter or get dragged under. Cutter used the release to twist, bring him around the van, and pin him against the bumper. His claws slid out, tips just pressing into the skin of the man's throat. "Come out," Cutter said again. As Cutter said that, I hit the holy water on the back of the windshield wipers. Some of them sprayed onto the man. The man's mouth opened wider than it should have. A rush of black smoke with slivers of red pushed out between his teeth, then tried to rush toward the van. The wards flared. The smoke hit the unseen barrier and burned, coming apart in sparks. The man collapsed, gasping. The woman and the truck driver both staggered, blinking, confusion breaking through as whatever rode them snatched free. Their eyes cleared. They looked around, panicked, then ran. They didn't look back. Cutter stepped away from the now unconscious driver and climbed back into the van. His hands were shaking, only a little. He clenched them until the tremor stopped. "That was a probe. Small fry. They wanted to see how we move. How hard we hit. How careful you are with bystanders." I turned us onto a side street, away from the intersection, away from the horns and flashing lights. "So?" I asked. He leaned back, rolled his shoulders, watching the mirror as the city slid past. "Next time, they won't bother pretending to ask." The city changed when we left the downtown grid and cut toward the river. Buildings thinned out. Streetlights spread farther apart. The sky above the warehouses took on a sick color. Dark, but stained with a faint red smear at the horizon. The air through the vents tasted of rust and burnt oil. My hands tightened on the wheel without me deciding to. "Smell that?" Cutter asked. "Yeah." "Old ground, bad ground." The route Nico had burned into my head led straight through an industrial zone that should have been dead at this hour. The factories and shipping yards out here mostly did nothing now. A few trucks sat parked, no drivers in sight. A crane stood frozen over a stack of containers. No hum of power, no movement. The road ahead bore chalk lines. At first I thought they were old lane markings. Then I saw the patterns. Circles, angles, symbols that belonged on altar floors, not asphalt. These weren't on the map that Nico put it in my head. Cutter leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Those sigils are fresh." The van rolled forward. The case on the floor hummed once, a dull thud in the air. The first drop hit the window shield. Not rain. Thick black stuff that smeared on the glass and clung. Then more. Heavy drops, steady, leaving streaks that glistened under the weak streetlights. I hit the wiper. The blade smeared it. The fluid sizzled when it touched the rubber. "Hellstorm trap. Key to the blood," Cutter said. "Of course it is," I replied. Then the fire started. It fell from above in slow arcs, not bright but dense, in sheets that moved at an angle that ignored gravity. It hit the ground and didn't spread. It crawled, it gathered, it formed lines over the chalkwork, feeding it. The symbols on the road lit with a dull orange flare. "Hang on," I said. I hit the ward switch. The van's undercarriage buzzed as the protection spun up. A ring of burning black sludge hit under the wheels and clung. The wards held, but the resistance was real. The engine worked harder. Warehouse doors on either side shuttered. Metal rolled up. Shadows moved inside. Demons stepped out. These were not the talkative kind from the intersection. Smaller, heavier in the shoulders, with 2 long arms and glowing cracks along their skin. Their eyes burned bright. Claws scraped the asphalt. A couple of them broke into a run toward us. Cutter unbuckled and stood, bones shifting under his skin. His hands lengthened, nails hardening into claws. Not full wolf, but close. "Keep a movin'," he said. He threw the door open and dropped out before I could answer. He hit the ground and sprinted at the nearest demon with no hesitation. The impact when they met shook the paneling of the van. More demons poured from the other doors. Some bounded on all fours, some moved upright, all headed for me and Cutter. The sigils under the van brightened. The black rain thickened. The fire arcing through the air bent toward the case, even through metal. The shockwave rune in the dash pulsed under my fingers. I took a breath, forced the van forward a few more yards, then braked. The demons closed in. 2 went for Cutter and 3 angled toward me. The rune pulsed again. "Fine," I said. "You asked for it." I hit the switch. The shockwave tore out from under the van in a low, hard blast. The air shuddered. The burning sludge and fire patterns on the ground blew outward in a ring, breaking the chalk lines, shattering the clean circles the demons had so carefully laid out. Sigil snapped. A low hum in the air broke into a flat crack and then silence. The demons staggered. 2 nearest to the van went down to their knees as the power under their feet vanished. Cutter used the moment to slam a demon's head into the side of a container. Bone broke and the demon slumped. Another one jumped onto the hood. Its claws hit the warded metal. Sparks flew. It raised both arms, driving its weight down. The glass creaked, but did not break. I floored it. The van surged forward, ramming the demon into a stack of pallets. It tumbled off the side. I swerved around a pool of fire that slid in a direction that made no sense and aimed for a gap between 2 warehouses. "Cutter!" I shouted. He heard me. He ripped his claws out of the last demon in reach, sprinted and then leaped. He caught the side door handle as I passed him and swung inside, slamming it shut with his boot. "Go," he said, breathing hard. I went. We shot between the warehouses and out onto a service road. The fire behind us dimmed. The black rain slowed and then stopped. The engine whined in protest but kept turning. The case on the floor thumped again. 1 pulse, then another, faster than before. "That thing isn't happy," I said. "It's reacting," Cutter said. He dragged his forearm across his face, wiping off demon blood and ash. "They tried to use it as a focus. You broke the circle before it caught." "You're welcome." He huffed a short breath that might have been a laugh. If Nico and the elders were too much of a beacon for the demons to find this thing, I can't imagine what it would be like to be them. I mean, they found us already twice. We drove in silence for a few minutes. The city shifted around us. Warehouses gave way to older buildings. Houses, narrow streets. We were heading toward the old districts now, the ones with more myths than working streetlights. "The safe house is 3 turns ahead," I said. Nico's route put it in the back of a narrow venue. Brick row houses, all dark except for one. A simple townhome with no sign, no neon, nothing special except a small symbol scratched into the doorframe. I recognized one of Lena's marks. Witches had been here. I pulled up in front. The wards that should have been anchored to the doorstep were now gone. Not faded, shattered. Charcoal streaks marked where sigils once were. The air around the door tasted burnt. "Stay sharp," Cutter said. We went in together. The front room was wrecked. Shelves thrown down, books scattered, candles smashed. Chalk dust ground into the floorboards. The smell of old incense fought with the sharp scent of demon scorch. A woman in her 30s sat propped against the far wall, one hand pressed to her side, blood leaking between her fingers. Her other hand still clutched the wand snapped in half. Her eyes lifted as we entered. "You're late," she said. Cutter moved to cover the door. I crossed to her, keeping one eye on the hall. "Demons hit you?" I asked. She gave a tight nod. "They came an hour ago, not many. Enough to test the wards. Enough to break them. They wanted to know if this was on your route." "They know about the ritual?" "The whole city knows. Any spirit with half a sense can feel it. The coven has their vial, the demons have theirs. Every time they push on the barrier, something shakes. There have been small tears all night. They keep trying to punch through before they're even ready." She winced, shifted, and muttered a small word under her breath. The air around her hand glowed dull red, then faded. The bleeding slowed. "You're one of Lena's?" "She sent word. Said you might stop here if things got rough." Her gaze dropped to the floor where the case sat behind me. "That's his vial." "Yeah?" "Then go. My wards are gone. I can give a skin over the van, but nothing more." She pushed herself up with a low grunt and reached for a half-intact chalk circle near the wall. Her fingers traced a shortened pattern, shaky with practice. Lines sparked, then sank down out of sight. "There. A simple blind. It will blur you from casual scrying, not from a focused search. I don't have that in me anymore, but it seems your ring is doing quite the job already." "You coming with us?" "I'd slow you down. I'll heal or I won't. Either way, I'm no use in a moving fight tonight." Cutter watched her a moment, then inclined his head. "You held them. Good work." She gave a tired smile. "Make it worth it." We left her there with her broken wand and ruined wards and stepped back into the street. I started the engine. The van shuddered, then settled. We rolled out, heading toward the Coven's district. For a while, nothing happened. No rain, no fire, no possessed drivers. Just dark buildings and the distant normal sounds of a city at night. People with no idea that anything bigger than rent and breakups lurked over their heads. Cutter rested his head against the seat, eyes closed. "You ever try to deal with demons?" he asked. "No, I deliver things. I don't negotiate with things that hate existence." "Pack did once. The pack did before I let it. Old Alpha thought he could hire them, use them to push out some human gangs. It worked. At first. Then they wanted more. Blood, space, worship. They opened a small rift over our ground. They meant to pull half the territory through, bind it as their foothold." "What happened?" "We bled. We tore them apart, closed it with help. Lost a lot of wolves, a lot of whelps. Lost that Alpha, but we learned a lesson." He opened his eyes, met mine for a moment. "I don't play games with hell. I end them," he said. I nodded. For him, this wasn't just a job. It was a reckoning. The closer we got to the Coven's warded area, the more the night pressed in. Street lights burned a little dimmer. Shadows clung to the corners of the buildings. Cutter stiffened suddenly. "Something's wrong," bigger than before. I followed his gaze upwards through the windshield. The sky had a crack. A line of deeper black cut across the clouds, too straight to be natural. It ran from one side of the district to the other. Inside that line, something moved. Fire, motion, distant forms shouldering against the edges, trying to widen it. The crack pulsed. The demons started their ritual. They're forcing the gate with the one vial they have. Can they do it without two? Not all the way, but they can still make a dent. Something might make its way through. The crack widened a fraction. I pushed the gas pedal down. The van surged forward into the thickening dark. Gravity broke first. The van's nose dipped, then lifted without me touching the wheel. My stomach lurched. The horizon tilted. Buildings on either side leaned inward, floors and windows sliding into angles that made no sense. "Hold on," I said. The steering wheel tugged against my grip, trying to turn itself upward toward the crack in the sky. The rift above us pulsed. The air thickened. Every part of the van creaked. Cutter shoved himself against the inside of the roof, one hand braced against the dash, shoulder pressed into my side to keep me in the seat. The seatbelt dug into my ribs. "You feel that?" "Hard to miss." Cars around us lifted off the ground a few inches, wheels spinning in open air, then dropped again. Headlights swung across the street at wrong angles. A trash can rose, hung there, then slammed into a wall. Something screeched against brick above us. I glanced up. Shapes moved along the sides of the buildings, claws dug into concrete, bodies crawling sideways, demons. They climbed along window ledges and fire escapes, pulling themselves toward the street, then pushing off towards us. Some glided. They used the warped gravity like a ramp. One launched from a fire escape and hit the hood. The front of the van pitched upward under the extra weight. The demon dug its claws into the metal and pulled itself toward the windshield, teeth bared. The God's blood case thumped once against the floor bracket, harder this time. "Stay down," Cutter said. He ripped off the belt, planted a hand on the seat, and pushed himself toward the back as the van tilted further. I fought the wheel, jamming my foot on the gas. Tires spun, caught, lost contact, then caught again when the pull shifted for a moment. A shadow dropped onto the roof with a heavy crash. The impact shook dust from the ceiling liner. "Roof," Cutter said. He headed for the side door, claws already pushing through his skin. The demon on the hood slammed its face against the glass, trying to crack it. Its eyes were bright, fixed on the center of the dash where the case sat just behind metal and wards. Its breath fogged the glass with smoke. I hit the forward ward switch. The rune in the lower corner of the windshield flared. A barely visible barrier pushed out from the glass in a short burst. The demon's head snapped back. It lost its grip for a second and slid down the hood, claws scraping deep grooves. I jerked the wheel left, then right, fighting the upward drag every time. The wards I had on the van seemed to keep us on the ground more than the other things around us, seemed to defy the gravity-bending reality. The side door slammed open and cold air rushed in. Cutter stepped out onto the moving road, grabbed the roof rail, and hauled himself up in one clean pull. The roof buckled under the weight of two bodies up there. The demon that had landed first snarled and clawed at the reinforced panel over the case. Sparks flew from its hands. The metal glowed faint orange for a moment, then cooled. The panel held, for now. I kept the van moving, slower than I wanted, faster than was safe. Straight ahead, the road bent through a narrow canyon of warehouses and residential buildings. Above, the crack in the sky widened another inch. The pull increased. The engine groaned. On the roof, feet thudded. Cutter roared. The demon shrieked. Bodies slammed into metal. I saw a low clearance sign ahead, a pedestrian bridge connecting two buildings over the street. "Cutter! Bridge!" I yelled. He heard me. He shifted his stance. I lined the van up and pushed the speed. The demon on the roof tried to stand, to brace. Cutter grabbed it from behind and held it up, arms locked. The top of the demon's head met the inner side of the bridge. The sound was wet and sharp. The body jerked, then went limp. Cutter let go. It rolled off the side and vanished under the wheels. We didn't have the luxury of protecting these human bodies anymore, these meat suits. The gravitational pull eased for 2 breaths, then surged again. The crack pulsed. I saw more demons crawling toward us from higher windows, lining up for another leaping run. "Sit down or fall off!" I shouted. Cutter dropped back to the rear door, yanked it open, and climbed in, slamming it behind him. "Still alive?" I asked. "Getting annoyed," he replied. The road ahead began to glow. We were crossing the outer of the Coven's warded district. Lines in the pavement lit up in pale blue patterns. Symbols etched into the curbs flared, reacting to the god's blood's presence. Lanterns hanging from old iron posts burned cold white, fire steady even in the warped air. Demons were already there, waiting. They had gathered at the edge of the wards, pressed against invisible walls. Some were human hosts. Others were out in their real forms, armored like the ones from the warehouse trap, skin cracked with internal fire. Their eyes tracked the van in unison. When we crossed into the warded zone, the first line of protection is activated. A wash of power rolled under the van, through the tires along the frame. The gravity drag cut out for a moment. The van dropped hard. My spine jarred. The god's blood case rattled in its cradle, and demons rushed us. Possessed humans came first, sprinting down the sidewalks, leaping off stoops, grabbing for door handles. The wards flared where truly demonic hands hit them, burning the skin away, driving those creatures back. The human ones did not trigger the same reaction. They slipped through gaps, tried to get close. I threaded the van through bodies and obstacles. A possessed man threw himself at the hood. I swerved just enough that he bounced off the side instead of going under the wheels. A demon in full form pounded against the pavement, trying to reach the chassis. The warded tires sparked and knocked it back. Another armored demon dropped from a balcony, slamming down in front of us. Its hands spread, and a wall of black flame rose up from the street. I hit the sprayer switch. Holy oil burst from jets along the front bumper and undercarriage, mixing with the demon's fire. The wall fractured, then split down the middle. We drove through the gap. Flames skated along the paint but didn't catch. Every time I had to slow, another set of claws or hands reached for the van. Cutter leaned out the door, slashing, punching, tearing demons away before they could latch on. Twice, he had to rip a possessed human free from the side panel and shove them clear. Ahead, past a knot of demons hammering at a weaker ward line, I saw it. From the street, the Coven's compound looked like a block of old brown stones, windows dark and doors plain. Behind the illusions, ward lines formed a rigid web in the air. The real structure sat under that cover. A heavy fortress of stone and blinding light, edges hard and sure. Breaks in the web glowed in stress points where demons struck. Witches stood on the front steps and along the inside of the barrier, hands raised, voices moving in spells I couldn't hear through the engine noise. Every time a demon slammed into the unseen wall, a crack of black fire shot out from the point of impact and spidered along the wards before fading. One of the witches on the steps turned, her eyes locked onto the van. "That's him!" she shouted. Her voice carried even through the chaos. "Get him through, now!" Cutter slapped the roof. "You heard her." I did. I floored it. The van shot forward and demons moved to block us. And 2 armored ones stepped into the street, arms spreading. A possessed man tried to throw himself in front of the wheels again. I clipped his leg, sent him spinning out of the path, then lined the van up with the narrow opening between the strongest ward lines. The outer barrier shook under impact from outside. One section flickered. The van crossed the threshold. For a heartbeat, everything went white. Wards flared around us, reading the case, reading us. The engine coughed, then roared. Demonic hands slapped the barrier behind us, pressed against invisible glass. We burst through to the other side and into the Coven's inner courtyard. The engine died the second I lifted my foot from the pedal. The van rolled another 2 feet and stopped. I sat there, hands locked on the wheel, pulse in my ears. Outside, witches ran towards us. Demons still hit the outer wards in waves, black fire licking at the edges. We had made it inside. For now. Witches pulled the doors open before I even got my seatbelt off. Hands reached into the van. Not for me, not for Cutter, but for the box between us. 3 of them lifted it together like they were carrying a bomb. Their faces were drawn and pale, eyes rimmed red from too many spells and not enough air. "Inside, now!" one of them said. Cutter slid out first, stretching his neck and rolling his shoulders. Blood and ash stained his shirt and arms. His eyes were bright, alive, ready for more. "I'll stay out here. You go in. They need that more than they need me." He was right. I grabbed the edge of the door and pulled myself out. My legs were shaking, but they still worked. I followed the witches as they carried the box across the courtyard. Behind us, the outer wards lit up and dimmed in steady pulses. Each hit from outside sent a ripple across the barrier. Demons still hammered away unseen beyond the wall of force, but their presence pressed against the air. The sound was like the distant thunder through concrete. We went inside. The Coven's sanctum was not a big hall with stained glass and candles. It was a tight, circular space deep in the building, walls of bare stone layered with old spell marks. The floor was covered in a single massive sigil chalked in white, red, and something darker. At its center sat a raised stone cradle with a shallow groove. One vial already rested there, held upright by fitted channels. The liquid inside that first vial glowed faint red from within. It pulsed in a rhythm that matched the dull pressure in the air. The High Priestess stood behind it. She looked like she had not sat down in days. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, streaked with gray. Her eyes were bloodshot, but they stayed sharp. Lines of dried blood traced from her nose to her chin. Her hands were steady. She turned when we entered. Her gaze went straight to the box. "Open it," she said. The witches set it down near the cradle. I stepped forward and thumbed the latch. The warder recognized my touch and released. The latch lifted. The god's blood sat in his slot, dark and heavy. The priestess reached in and took the vial with careful fingers. Wards sparkled against her skin and then accepted her. She moved like she had carried worse. "Good. We may still have time to close this." She placed the new vial in the second groove in the cradle beside the first. The two pulsed together. "What about the third, the ones the demons have?" "We will not see that one. We see the results. We don't need it anyways. 2 is enough." She motioned to the witches around the circle. There were 7 of them. Young, old, tired, wired. They took their positions at fixed points around the sigil, hands held slightly out, feet braced. "You stay there. You do not step into the circle. You do not speak unless spoken to. You are our witness." I moved to the edge. My back found the stone. I tried not to look at the vials too long. My teeth vibrated when I did. Outside, the demons hit the barrier again. The sound came through the walls like a deep drum beat. Dust had drifted from the ceiling. Cutter was out there with them. A younger witch at a point near me glanced over, eyes quick. "If this goes bad, run. You can't help if you're dead." "That's what everyone keeps telling me," I said. The High Priestess raised her hands and the room went quiet. "Begin." The Coven started to chant. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't smooth. It was raw and low and hard. Words layered over each other in different languages and cadences. The sigil on the floor lit up in sections. The light moved like breath around the circle, connecting each witch to the next. The vials responded. The liquid in both thickened and brightened. Each pulse inside them climbed into the air, threads of force raising from the glass and linking to the lines on the floor. The pressure in my chest increased. The room tilted slightly. The lights in the ceiling flickered. For a moment, everyone's breath fell in a sync. Every inhale, every exhale. My lungs moved with theirs without my say-so. It felt like the whole room had one body and one set of lungs, and I was stuck inside it. Outside, someone roared. That sound sounded like a wolf. Cutter. The outer beats from the barrier hit sped up. The demons were pushing harder. I heard spells being shouted in from the courtyard between the thuds. The priestess raised her voice. The chant shifted into a different pattern. The lines on the floor brightened. Sweat ran down her face, but her hands never shook. The vials swelled with light. The air cracked as something big hit the boards outside. The whole building shook. One candle fell and guttered out. No one in the circle flinched. An impact followed, harder. I heard shouts. I heard a stone break. A third. The barrier outside screamed and a tone fell in my bones. Then something broke through. The sound of the impact as it landed in the courtyard came up through the floor, heavy and solid. The chanting faltered for 1 second. Then recovered. I stepped toward the doorway that led back to the courtyard. The young witch near me hissed, "Don't leave!" I stayed, barely. A roar blasted through the building, deeper than the others, full of old anger. Cutter's voice answered it rough and eager. "I remember you. We have unfinished business," Cutter yelled. The walls shook with the force of their clash. I pictured them, Cutter in full shift, claws sunk into something bigger than the demons we'd faced so far. A lieutenant. One of the ones who had almost pulled his pack's land into another plane. Every blow they traded rattled dust from the ceiling. Each hit made the sigil's light flicker. The priestess clenched her jaw. Hold steady." The witches dug in. They did not break the circle. The chanting swelled, the room leaned further, and I felt sweat on my back, soaked into my shirt. The air tasted like metal and burnt incense. The vials burst. Not glass, but light. A column of white-red force shot upward from the cradle straight through the ceiling without breaking stone. It went higher than the building, higher than the district. It hit the crack in the sky like a lance. Outside, the demon's rift was almost open. The line had widened into a jagged wound. The thing behind it pressed against the edges, a vast form hard to see and easier to feel, claws or hands or wings. A bulk that did not belong here, trying to shove through. When the witch's column hit, the gate bucked. The pressure that had been pulling everything upward reversed. The crack writhed. The shape behind it twisted, caught between movement and confinement. For a second, the city groaned. Every window in the district rattled. Every ward flared. The priestess shouted the last words of the ceiling. The witches answered in unison, voices raw. The column flared to full force. The 2 vials emptied in a single instant, their contents translated into pure binding. The air in the room screamed without sound. Up ahead, the rift twisted inward. The thing behind it tried to force its way through. A limb or tendril reached and hit the column of counterforce that started to come apart. The gate snapped shut around it like an iron jaw. The demon howled. The sound cut off halfway. The crack collapsed. The sky sealed. The pressure vanished. In the courtyard, every demon still standing screamed. Some burst into ash where they stood. Some caught fire. Not red or orange, but chalk white, burning from the inside out. Others were yanked backwards by invisible hooks, sucked toward points in the air that closed behind them like pinch wounds. The lieutenant fighting Cutter jerked mid-swing. Its eyes went wide. Shadow fire poured from every crack in its skin. It tried to grab onto him. He tore free and leaped back as his body folded in on itself. Then, for the first time that night, there was quiet. The column of light in the ritual chamber faded. The sigil on the floor dimmed and went out. The vials on the cradle were empty now, just glass with a faint stain at the bottom. One by one, the witches slumped. A few stayed on their feet, most dropped to their knees. One lay flat on her back, chest heaving. The high priestess stayed standing, barely. Her shoulders sagged. Her eyes closed for a long beat. Then she opened them and looked at me. "You did your job. We won't forget it." I nodded. Cutter appeared in the doorway a moment later. He was covered in blood and soot. His shirt was shredded. One ear was torn, but he grinned. "Told ya. Bad for business to let them win. I let out a breath and hadn't realized I was holding and leaned my head back against the wall. Outside, the courtyard was a mess of scorched stone, ash piles, cracked flagstones, and collapsed sections of outer wall. But it was quiet. No more pressure in the air. No more wrong gravity. Just a tired city that had no idea how close it had come. The vials were dead, the gate was shut, and the night was, for the moment, ours again. And me? I was already thinking about the drive back to Nico, the weight of the wheel in my hands and the envelope I knew would be waiting. No glory, no applause. But the job was done. The ride back was smooth. The coven let us rest for maybe 20 minutes, long enough for someone to push a healing charm into Cutter's shoulder and patch a cut on my forehead. The witches tried to heal his ear back together, but Cutter refused, claiming something about battle scars, wounds, and chicks. Then we were back in my van. I turned the key. The engine caught on the second try, then settled into a low, steady rumble. No shudder, no extra hum in the wards. The streets near the coven's compound were quiet. The crack in the sky was gone. The air felt thin and tired. The witches assured us that our drive home would be fine, that their spell was powerful enough to vaporize and send back any demon near area to hell. I pulled us away from the coven's inner gate and slid back into the main arteries of the city. Streetlights burned steady. No flicker, no bend in the road where none should be. We passed a late-night food cart with a couple arguing over fries. A bus rumbled through an intersection, driver yawning. A cat trotted along the top of a fence and did not stare at the sky or hiss at any older, then headed back through the garage and out toward the drive. I watched him go until he vanished around the curve of the house. Nico gestured toward the interior door. "Come." I followed him back and I hadn't planned on getting fought over by a vampire and a succubus. Nico's place was in full swing again. Not crisis mode this time. Just another one of his small gatherings, which meant a crowd big enough to fill a concert hall spread through polished stone halls and open balconies. I was doing what I always did at these things, staying near enough to the bar that I could refill fast and far enough from the center that no one important tripped over me. I had one drink in, good suit jacket on, clean jeans, boots that still had demon ash on them if you looked close enough. My body still remembered the way the world had bent open above the coven's compound. The bruises were gone, but the nerves weren't. "Samuel," a voice purred near my ear. "You clean up well." Succubus. You could always tell before you turned. Voice a little too smooth, presence a little too warm, eyes a little too focused on your pulse. I turned away. She stood too close, hand resting on the bar next to mine, nails the color of fresh blood. Her dress clung to her. Her eyes wandered over my throat, then dropped to my chest, then back up. "Thanks." "Oh, Nico hides you. That's rude of him. I'm not exactly premium decor, more of a utility piece. Utility can be very attractive." Her fingers brushed the back of my hand. Before I could pull away, another presence slid in on my other side. Cold this time. Not Nico level, but cold enough. A vampire. Young-looking, sharp suit. Eyes with that soft, focused hunger. "Am I interrupting?" he asked. He already knew the answer. "Depends," the succubus said. "You're Nico's driver. Among other things, he has good taste. You're wasted as cargo." "I saw him first," the succubus said. "I'm not a drink ticket, you know. I'm just a guy trying to enjoy my drink at a bar." They both ignored me. "He doesn't have a mark. That means he's unclaimed. That means he's free and bored. Her hand slid up my wrist. Nico's voice cut through everything. Well, he may be unmarked, but he certainly isn't unclaimed. Samuel belongs to me. He appeared at my shoulder, one hand resting light on my back. To anyone else, he looked calm and amused. I saw the faint tightening at the corner of his eyes. Walk with me. Then to the other two, play with a different toy. Samuel is mine. The succubus's nostrils flared. The vamp's jaw clenched. Neither of them argued with him, though. Nico steered me away, through a doorway and into one of the side halls. The moment we crossed the threshold, the pressure eased. You collect some of the weirdest fans, you know. I didn't invite them to compete over you. I do not intend to mediate feeding rights over a mortal employee. There are limits to my patience. Good to know where the line is. I tried to be boring. You failed. But relax. I did not pull you away to scold you. We moved into his study. The same shelves, same heavy desk. The same faint scent of old books and older blood. The door closed behind us on its own. I'm listening. He went to the sideboard and poured himself a drink. Something dark in a cut glass tumbler. He poured nothing for me. He knew I still had half a glass outside. You have been busy, Samuel. God's blood runs, demon sieges, treaties. You have driven more history across this city in the past couple of months than most anyone I've ever seen. Yeah, my therapist is gonna love it if I ever get one. You lining up more of the same for me? Not tonight. I have a quieter arrangement. A side channel. It might be good for you. I'm listening. There is an establishment. Monster Market. A neutral supermarket for the supernatural. Food only, no spells, no relics. They serve vampires, wares, witches, ghouls. Anyone who needs specialized sustenance without hunting. I raised my eyebrows. You're telling me there's a supernatural Costco and you're only just now mentioning it? I do not enjoy crowds, but it exists. It is respected. They keep strict neutrality. The manager reached out. He needed a delivery driver who understands discretion. And you gave him my name? Of course. You have proven that you can deliver volatile cargo through hostile territory and not open the box to satisfy your curiosity. You are resistant to panic, and you obey instructions most of the time. Flattered. What's the job? Food runs. Blood in bulk, exotic meats, ingredients. No demons, no gods, just inventory. You say that now. I say that because it is true. The risk is not zero, it never is. But compared to your last few tasks, this is a relief. You would like to pay your rent without watching the sky split, I assume. He wasn't wrong. Who runs the place? A human named Daniel. He inherited the position when the previous manager ascended or descended, depending on who you ask. He understands the rules. He needs someone who can handle the road. I told him you would visit tonight. You scheduled an interview for me without asking? You were going to say yes. Save us both the pretense. I thought about the crack in the sky over the coven. The way the van had fought gravity, the pressure in my bones. I thought about the weight of the envelope Nico had handed me after, and the way my hands had still shaken. Fine, I'll meet your grocery guy. Good. You can still enjoy the party after. Avoid the succubi and the insecure fledglings who think feeding on my driver is a status symbol. No promises, and they seem very committed. He smiled with his mouth, but not his eyes. Try. Monster Market sat in a forgotten strip of commercial space on the edge of a warehouse district. From the street, it could have been any dead chain store. Old signage bolted over with a blank panel. Empty lot, cracked pavement. A few cars scattered near the entrance. Fluorescents hummed behind tinted glass. I pulled my microbus into a spot near the employee entrance. The wards along the exterior of the building tingled against the back of my neck when I stepped out. Simple, solid protections. No flashy sigils. Just layers of work that said nothing here happened by accident. The main doors were open, so I went through those. The threshold caught me the way Papa Styx's bar did. Neutral ground had a certain feel to it once you'd walked enough of it. A sense that something large and invisible was watching and keeping score of things. Inside looked, on first glance, like a regular grocery store on night shift. Aisles, metal shelves, end caps full of promotional junk. A few carts parked near the entrance, overhead signs that said things like produce and frozen. Then you read the smaller print. Blood and fluids over one section, with labeled rows for species. Bottles and bags in neat lines, some with medical labels, some handwritten. Special cuts over a butcher counter where something on a hook still had claws. An aisle of dried herbs and powders that did not come from any health food store, and jars with warnings about dosage and side effects. By the door, a sign on a stand. No hunting on premises. No feeding without consent. No magic in the aisles. Neutral ground. Violators are removed and banned. A vampire couple pushed a cart past by me, arguing quietly over whether to get synthetic mix or the good stuff. A ghoul in a polo shirt scanned items at a self-check line. A witch squinted at a jar of preserved something, lips moving as she read the fine print. "Can I help you?" a voice asked. The guy behind the service counter had the look of someone who had seen too many night shifts and not enough sunlight. Late 20s, dark circles. Hair pulled back in a tie that had given up hours ago. Polo shirt with the Monster Meat logo. Name tag read, Daniel. Sammy, Nico sent me. His shoulders loosened the slightest bit. "You're the driver?" "That's the rumor." "You're human." "So are you." We looked at each other for a second, both processing the relief that came with not being the only soft mortal thing in the building. "Okay, that makes this easier. Come on." He came around the counter and led me through a swinging door into the back. The smell shifted from spices and cleaning products to cold metal and meat. Industrial fridges hummed. Boxes stacked against walls bore labels in multiple alphabets. "First time here?" "Yeah, Nico doesn't strike me as a weekly shopper." "He sends people, mostly for rare orders. He likes good blood and doesn't like leaving the house for it." "That tracks." "He told me you're steady, that you don't go through people's cargo, even when it's weird." "Weird is the gig. So, what's the run?" He picked up a clipboard from a hook by the door. Paper manifest, not a tablet. Handy when tech started glitching around certain items. "Standard restock and one high-ticket transfer. You go to the supplier, pick up the order, drive it back. Everything will be pre-packed on ice. You don't open anything, you don't let anyone else open anything. You don't talk to anyone who doesn't talk business. You get it?" "Got it." "You nervous?" "Always. But this is simple, on paper. We've used this supplier before. They keep everything all right." He handed me the clipboard. I scanned the list. Blood, sorted by type and origin. Various cuts of meat with notes I didn't want to dwell on. Then, near the bottom, one line in bold marker. Prime Cryptid Organ, Client Transfer. Do not open, do not unpack. Direct handoff on delivery. Fun. What am I to this client, a ghost? Anonymous buyer. Pays very well. Uses intermediaries. It's a hot, old and rare. Non-sapient, no souls involved. We don't touch that line, but it's still a lot of responsibility. A heart? He hesitated. That's what the notes say. Big from something that doesn't exist anymore. Used in very high-end rituals. You don't need the details. You're moving a pricey lump that needs to stay cold and intact. Fair. Anything I need to know about the route? It's local. Warehouse on the river's east side. And they know you're coming. Their guys will load your van. You bring it right back, no detours, no stops. Payment? He smiled for the first time, a quick flash. You get paid per run, plus a hazard if things go sideways. Nico negotiated on your behalf, which means I'm probably underpaying you for what you've already survived and overpaying compared to my budget. I can live with that. The back door swung again. A woman steps through carrying a plastic tub of packaged steaks. She set it down on a prep table with a thud. Shoulders broad, hair pulled into a tight knot, apron stained. Her eyes cut to me and held. Woof. You could feel it in the way her muscles sat under her skin, coiled even when she stood still. New guy? She asked. Driver. Sammy, this is Nessie. She runs meat. Nessie, this is the human Nico recommended. She wiped her hands on a towel, looking me over. You work for Nico when you're still breathing? Impressive. Been a close vote a few times. Your staff? Yeah. Monster market, full-time, benefits and everything. Ex-Greyfang, if that matters to you. It did. I remembered the band of wolves who had torn into the road during the Eye of Icarus run. The snarls, the way they moved around the van, the way Nico had said Greyfangs with that mix of annoyance and respect reserved for people too dumb to know when to quit. It doesn't matter to me, as long as you're not going to chew in the rear tires while I'm backing up. She snorted. I left that life. They didn't leave me, but that's their problem. Here, we follow the rules. No hunting on premises. No pack business in the aisles. We sell food. We don't make new bodies. Good policy. She studied me for another beat, then nodded once. Watch the roads. Greyfangs have been louder lately. If you see bikes, don't stop. Comforting. Thanks. Daniel clapped his hands once. All right, you go. We'll have the bay open when you get back. Call if anything feels wrong. Define wrong. More wrong than usual. The supplier's warehouse sat near the river, in that stretch of industrial land that never quite died and never quite lived. Lights burned over a loading dock. A man in a stained jacket met me outside, checked Daniel's manifest, and weighed me in with no small. A quiet grocery run. Nessie's nostrils flared, her pupils narrowed. They're not here to browse. I glanced back at the van, at the crates, at the dark, heavy shape of the chest buried in ice. The easy job had just ended. Daniel moved fast. He jumped to the wall panel and slammed his palm against a red pad. The siren cut off mid-screech. Overhead, the main lights went down a few levels and an amber wash took over. A recorded voice rolled through the bay and into the store. Lockdown engaged. Please remain calm and follow staff instructions. This is a neutral ground security event. The heavy interior door to the back room thunked shut on its own. Somewhere out in the main aisles, I heard carts stop and someone swear. The thing outside hit the garage door again. Metal shrieked. The wards flared bright, held, then settled into a steady glow along the frame. Tell me that's not normal. We have drills. We don't usually have bikers ramming the door 10 seconds after you show up. That's the Greyfangs, Nessie said. Her teeth were a little longer now. Fantastic. What did I bring him? Daniel grabbed the manifest and stalked to the back of the microbus. I followed. Nessie stayed near the door, head tilted, listening to whatever was happening beyond the metal. We popped the rear doors. Cold air rolled out, carrying the smell of blood, ice, and something thick. Crates lined the cargo bed. Daniel ran his finger down the manifest. Standard stock. Nothing that justifies a except this. Prime cryptid organ, client transfer, do not open, do not unpack. He looked at me. I looked at the one crate that didn't match the others. The steel-reinforced corners, extra latches, frost clinging to the edges. The thing had its own presence. Nessie stepped closer. Her nostrils flared. Her eyes went yellow around the edges. That's it. Whatever is in there, that's what they're hunting. The garage door boomed again. Dust shook loose from the seams in the ceiling. On the third hit, a hairline crack appeared in the corner of one of the frames. The wards around it flared and stitched to close. I'm getting sick of that sound already. Then handle the cause, a new voice said. We turned. A man stood in the doorway that led from the back room into the bay. Tall, lean, a suit that fit too well to be off the rack. Pale skin with no pore texture, hair cut neat, and eyes calm, flat, and dark. Victor. I'd seen him once before at one of Nico's things. He was one of those old vampires who moved through rooms as if everything had already been decided and he was just walking through the results. Tonight he had a shopping cart in front of him, a few racks of sealed blood bags at the bottom, 2 opaque containers with private labels stacked near the handle. Busy night? His gaze slid from Daniel to me to Nessie, then to the reinforced chest. Interesting inventory. We're closed, Daniel said on reflex. Your doors are closed, but your market is very open to problems. Gray fangs outside? So it seems, Nessie muttered. They tailed me from the supplier, sat across the street until I rich. I give him 0 stars. Victor's eyes stayed on the chest. Cryptid. There were stories when I was newly turned, thousands of years ago. Things that were old even then. Predators that made even dragons nervous. Their hearts could be used for all kinds of religious and magical rites. It amplifies everything. There is power in these. There can't be but a few handfuls left. So the Grey Fangs want a power snack. They want leverage. You feed that heart or pieces of it to a strong enough alpha, and they pull other packs under them fast. Or they chop it up and sell pieces to anyone desperate enough. Either way, they climb out of the gutter by standing on the necks of everyone else. The Grey Fangs will use it for their unquenchable power. Outside, the wolves hit the door again. The ward screamed, but still held. Daniel rubbed the bridge of his nose. The buyer told us the heart was for containment rituals. To strengthen a warded side out of town, he wouldn't reveal himself, but he paid up front in a way that checked out. I did the math. A dead beast, no mind, no soul, and one rich idiot throwing money to keep something quiet in his corner of the world, so I let it through. Rich idiot might not be wrong. There are uses for such things beyond chewing and howling. But the Grey Fangs do not care about nuance. They see meat and think only of teeth. As Victor said this, he picked up one of his blood bags, opened it up with one of his sharp nails, and sucked the blood down. You can feel it. Depth. Age. This is not some normal monster piece. Your buyer knew what he was ordering. You tempted? I asked him. I know better. I've survived this long for a while, boy. The voice outside shifted tone, less taunting, more threat. This is your last chance, Market. Hand the heart out. Put the driver just outside the door. We take him in the crate and we leave. You keep hiding, and what happens next is on you. I looked at Daniel. He's lying. I know. We let them drag a contracted shipment and my driver out of a neutral store, we might as well shut down. No one will trust us again. We'll get to that in a second. Right now, I need to know if we're staring at something that will eat the building from the inside if it cracks. The chest is solid, the wards are good. It isn't pushing. It's not a cursed thing, it's a resource. A nasty one, but a resource. The danger is outside. Victor nodded once. She's right. That heart is dead and preserved. The power in it leaks into the air, but it has no will. The wolves do, and they are the problem. So, we've got an ethically gray organ in a box, an anonymous buyer waiting, and a gang of psychos at the door who just want to use it to turn this whole city into their personal hunting lodge. Am I missing anything? That's about right, Victor said. Daniel nodded once. Fear sat in his shoulders, but something harder settled over it. All right, then we decide what Monster Market really is. The chest sat in the center of the bay, silent and heavy. The door shuddered again under another hit. The wards flared, then steadied. Everyone in that room understood it then. This was no longer just a grocery run. This was a fight over what stayed neutral and what got eaten. We don't surrender staff, we don't surrender goods under contract. We hold. If they want to claim this place, they have to do it over our bodies. Good, Victor said. I like my Monster Market. The store speakers crackled. Daniel spoke over them. Attention all staff and customers, this is Daniel. We have a hostile pack outside the building and lockdown is in effect. This ain't a drill. Somewhere out in the main aisles, someone swore loud enough that we heard it through the walls. Non-combatants, please move to reinforced areas. The freezers have secondary wards. The storerooms between aisles 2 and 3 are the safest. If you don't know where to go, find an employee and ask. Anyone willing and able to help defend the market, report to central aisles in the main floor. We will not be handing anybody over. He let go of the button. That sounded pretty good. Fake it until you don't die. We need bodies on the floor and eyes on the wards. Go. Nessie pushed through the inner door to the store. Victor followed, cart rolling ahead of him until he parked it against the wall and left it. I jogged behind them into the main aisle of Monster Market under emergency light. The place looked different now. Most of the ambient chatter had gone dead. Customers peeked out from around displays. A witch in denim jacket cracked her knuckles, muttering under her breath as spell marks crawled along the backs of her hands. A ghoul clerk reached under a checkout lane and pulled out a bat with engraved sigils burnt into the wood. A squat demon in a stained apron rolled his eyes, handed off his broom to another worker, and stopped toward the front, grumbling about never getting a quiet shift. Nessie took over without asking. You with the bat! Front aisle by the blood section, she said to the ghoul. If anything gets that far, they can't reach the coolers. Witches, I want you back from the front line working through cover. We don't need friendly fire. 2 witches moved and nodded into flanking positions near the ends of the aisle, behind stacks of canned goods. Sammy, you know how to move in a fight? Mostly away from swinging claws. Good enough. Help block corridors. Keep people moving. Victor had drifted near the front of the store. He loosened his tie and rolled his shoulders, quiet and composed. The next hit on the building didn't come from the loading bay. It came from the left side of the structure near aisle 8. A deep hammering force struck the wall twice, then a third time. Wards flared through the drywall in a pattern like cracking glass. The air tasted sharp and metallic. Nessie looked up. Side entrance, they found a thinner spot. A fourth hit landed. A spider web of red light traced itself along the ceiling. "Everyone off of 8, now!" Aisle 8 emptied fast. 2 seconds later, a section of the side wall bulged inward. There was a tearing sound as something in the ward pattern gave. Plaster split. A hand with too much fur and 2 long claws punched through the wall and tore downward. "That's our breach, let's go," Nessie said. She charged towards the aisle. I grabbed a rolling cart full of bulk rice bags and pushed it in the same direction. Victor moved, not quite a blur, but faster than any human. The wall gave in a rough circle. 3 wolves forced their way in through the broken section, muzzles full of teeth, eyes glowing. The one in the lead stopped when he saw Nessie. Recognition flared. "Well, they do keep you like a pet." "Hello, Rake. Still compensating with the vest, I see." "Run away from home and get a job in a grocery store. You always did, eh, my?" The 2 behind him chuckled. One of them sniffed the air, head tipping toward the back of the store. "Art's here. Close. I can smell it. It's a pack, right, Nessie? You know it's ours." "It's not yours. You didn't kill it. You didn't track it. You just heard there was meat with magic in it and decided it belonged to you." "Better with us than in some freezer for leeches and spell flingers. You gonna stand between us and it? For them?" She didn't answer with words. She answered by leaping at his throat. They hit the floor hard. Claws tore at flesh. Teeth snapped. He was bigger than she was, older, more scarred. But she moved quicker. The 2 other wolves stepped to go around them, aiming down the aisle toward the back. I shoved the cart of rice sideways into their path and kicked the lock on the wheels. One of them slammed into it chest first and stumbled. The others vaulted, snarling. I yanked the fire extinguisher off the wall, popped the pin, and blasted the landing wolf full in the face. The spray thundered out in a thick cloud. He howled, blinded, swiping at nothing. The ghoul clerk with the bat stepped in from the side and swung for the blinded wolf's knee. The crack of impact was loud and ugly. The wolf went down roaring. The second wolf tried to wrench the cart aside. Victor appeared behind him, and one pale hand grabbed the back of the wolf's neck. The other wrapped around his jaw. A quick twist. There was a snap. The wolf's body sagged. Victor let it drop and stepped back before the falling weight pulled him off balance. He didn't speak. He moved to the next threat. Rake and Nessie rolled, trading control. He slammed her against the shelf. Cans rattled and fell. She drove her knee into his ribs once, twice, until something gave. He punched her across the jaw and blood flew. She shook it off and bit into his shoulder, tearing flesh away. "Traitor!" He tried to reach for the gap in the wall. She pinned his arm and twisted it until the joint popped. He howled. She dropped him into the floor, slammed his head once, twice, and then he stopped moving. Breathing hard, she pushed off him and looked up, checking the aisle. The blinded wolf was still swinging. I hit him again with the extinguisher blast. The ghoul brought the bat down on his head and he dropped. In the wall, the hole pulsed with red light. The wards crawled over the ragged edge of drywall, fusing cracks, slow but steady. "That's 3. They'll send more. These were expendable," Victor said. He wiped a fleck of blood from his cuff with a slight frown. "The store's still standing. Anyone hurt bad?" "Bruised. Nothing broken that won't fixed." "Good. How about the wards?" "Stressed. Not shattered. They found a soft spot and pushed. Now they know they can tear the skin if they work hard enough." "Test run. Check the defenses to see how we react." "Exactly." The first blood had been drawn inside Monster Market. It wasn't enough to end anything, but it was enough to prove that the market would swing back. The Gray Fangs had tested a wall and found it painful. The next hit would be heavier. Whew, you could feel it in your teeth. The whole building jumped. The shelves rattled. A few glass bottles gave up and shattered. The wards along the ceiling flared bright red for a breath, then sank to a dull, angry glow. "They're ramping up." Monster Market looked worse now. Dry goods aisle was half blocked with broken product. One freezer door was cracked. Blood had dried in streaks where we dragged one of the earlier wolves out of the way. Daniel stood at the front end of the store between the registers and the blood aisle. His headset was crooked, shirt untouched, clipboard gone somewhere. He was trying to look in 3 directions at once. The next blow hit the front doors. Not a ram this time, but a focused push of blood and rage. The glass didn't shatter. It warped. The metal frames bent inward. Wards crawled over the surface, trying to hold it together.
"They've got a caster out there,"
the Denim Witch said.
"They're smearing blood over the wards to find the gaps."
"Can you strengthen it?" Daniel asked her.
"For a while. I'm not a coven, I'm one person. They've got a lot of blood to burn."
The wolves hit again. This time, one section of the glass spiderwebbed. The wards flashed in a wild pattern and then tore. Not all the way, just enough that something could push through. A clawed hand punched through the crack, then a shoulder, and a head forced itself between the failing projections, fur bristling, muzzle pulled back in a snarl.
"Front, we've got a breach,"
I yelled. The hand vanished, then came harder again. The gap widened. One gray fang forced himself through the half-failed barrier. Ward scored burning lines down his skin, but he pushed and pushed until he was inside. Smoke rose from the charred fur along his back. His eyes burned with the kind of rage that didn't care about pain. He landed in the front end of the store near the registers. For half a second, he took in the scene. Staff, customers, Daniel. He went for Daniel. "Move!" I shouted. Daniel froze. You could see the moment his brain tried to catch up to his body and failed. Henry didn't freeze. He stepped between Daniel and the charging wolf without thinking about it. One second he was at Daniel's shoulder, and the next he was braced in front of him, arms up as if it would do anything against claws as long as my fingers. It didn't. The wolf hit him full on. Claws tore through shirt and skin. Henry's breath left him in a grunt that cut off in the middle. The wolf's jaws snapped once at his throat. Blood sprayed across the register counter. Daniel screamed his name. The wolf dropped to Henry aside like trash and reached for Daniel again, eyes locked on him. He didn't reach far. Victor moved. One moment he was down the aisle, hands empty. The next he was in front of the wolf. No blur, no flash. Just a step that closed far too much distance in one smooth line. The wolf swiped at him. Victor slipped past the claws, caught the wolf's wrist in one hand and his chest in the other. His fingers punched in. There was a wet crunch, and then another. Victor's hand came back holding something red and heavy that pulsed once and then sagged. The wolf stumbled, eyes wide, mouth working, soundless. His legs gave out. He hit the floor in a heap. Victor dropped the heart onto the tile. It rolled once and came to rest in a smear of blood. The whole front end of the store went quiet except for the howl outside and the ragged sound of Daniel trying to breathe. And Henry lay on his back, eyes open and clouding. His shirt was a mess of red. There was a hole where his throat should have been, but a throat and not an open ruin. His hands twitched once, then flattened. Daniel dropped to his knees beside him.
Henry, no, stay with me. Come on, man."
The witch knelt on Henry's other side.
"There's nothing. He's gone."
Daniel's hands hovered uselessly. Blood soaked into his pants. He stared down at Henry's face as if he could will his clerk to sit up and complain about the mess. Nothing moved. Outside, the wolves slammed the door again. The cracked section of glass shivered. Wards tried to knit, but less eagerly now. They had lost something when that one wolf forced his way in. Nessie came up behind us, breathing hard. She looked at the corpse on the floor, then at Daniel, then at Victor and the torn open wolf.
"This isn't going to stop. Not while they still think they can get inside and feast."
Daniel didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on Henry's face.
"He was a kid. He worked here 2 nights a week. He used to bring in donuts from the human bakery down the street and complain that no one appreciated them enough. He even kept a stash of lollipops under the counter for freaked out customers." "I know."
Nessie's jaw tightened. "They're not going to stop," Victor said. "Even if we push them back again, they'll regroup. They'll come with more blood and more bodies."
"Enough. We're not a vault, we're a market. We close deals. We don't hoard weapons until some pack decides they get to roll dice with our lives. We have to burn it. We have to destroy the heart and send it back to wherever it came from. We deny the Grave Fangs the power they so desperately want. Your buyer isn't going to like that, Daniel. I don't care about the buyer, man. This is our lives here. Henry just died. Others could too. All right. Nessie, Victor, Sammy, back to the bay with me. We've got a heart to kill. We left Henry on the floor and walked. Nobody said a word on the way back. The chest waited in the loading bay. Frost clung to the metal. The wards along its edges pulsed slow and steady. Daniel stopped in front of it. His hands were still red where he grabbed Henry. That thing isn't worth one of mine. I don't care who paid. I don't care what they promised. We're killing it. Nessie nodded once. Good. The denim jacket witch and an older witch came in through the inner doors. The older one's apron was streaked with ash and chalk. You mean it? You're ready to wipe the heart? Yes. Can you do it without blowing a hole in my roof? Not with just fire. It's too loaded. Burn it wrong, and we could release whatever power is stuck in there. We're short on options. What does gone look like? We smother the power while we burn it. Her gaze went to Victor. We drown it in something even more ancient. Something to contain the power. Victor watched her. You want my blood? Yes, we need it. Blood magic is incredibly powerful. Any risk to me? Minor sting. Unless you jump into the fire, you'll be fine. He rolled his sleeves back. Then take what you need. This market makes my life easier. I prefer it unbroken. She cut his wrist quick, caught what came out, and smeared it onto her palm. The blood darkened as it hit air, thicker than it should have been. She flicked it out in drops around an empty section of floor. Each drop hit and sank, leaving a black point that pulsed. Disposal bay, the big burner, she said to Daniel. He led us through another door into a smaller room, steel hatch on one wall, heavy furnace on the other. It smelled of old smoke and cleaning chemicals. This is where we get rid of the stuff that can't go in normal trash. You're about to give it the worst meal it's ever had. The older witch traced a circle around the center of the floor. Where her finger passed, faint blue lines appeared in the concrete and closed into a ring. The denim witch added chalk marks between the blood points, quick and practiced. Bring the chest. Nessie and I dragged it in on a cart. It was even heavier now that we knew it was inside. Do not touch it bare. Use gloves. Nessie grabbed a pair from a hook, flexed her fingers into them, and undid the latches. She muttered under her breath as she cracked the ward line on the lid, careful and focused. Cold rolled out when she lifted it. Not regular freezer chill, but something deeper and older. Pick it up. Straight into the fire. No speeches, no games, and then we end it. Nessie slid her gloved hand under the heart and lifted. Her arms trembled, but she held it. One witch recited the incantation with Victor's blood, and the other witch opened the incinerator door. Heat pushed out. The witch pressed her bloody hand to a control rune and murmured 3 sharp words. The flame inside flared white. She shoved the heart into the furnace. It hit the grate and stuck. The older witch slammed the door, and the circle on the floor flared. The furnace roared higher, and something in the air pulled tight and then snapped. The smell that seeped through the seals was thick and foul. A burned animal stench that carried the hint of something heavier, then faded as the fire did its work. Outside, the wolves howled. The pitch changed halfway through, confusion and anger cutting into the sound. The witch's chanting slowed. The lines on the floor dimmed. It's breaking apart. Give it another minute. We stood there and listened to the fire. When the glow in the circle finally went out, the older witch stepped back, breathing hard. It's done. What's left in there is waste. No more heart and no more power. I let out a breath. Nessie peeled off the gloves and tossed them into a bin. Daniel looked at the furnace door. Okay, now we tell the dogs outside the buffet is closed. A howl went up, sharper than before. It rose, cracked, and turned into a steady string of curses that didn't need words to carry any meaning. Yeah, buffet's gone. They hit the front doors again. The glass shrieked. Nessie rolled her shoulders. We headed back to the main floor. The front of Monster Market looked worse now. The big entry doors were spiderwebbed, bowed inward. Cracks traced through the plaster around the frames. Makeshift barricades of carts and toppled displays blocked direct paths. Staff and customers stood behind them. Witch hands glowed faintly. The ghoul clerk held his bat low. The demon in the apron gripped a cleaver that could probably take a hand off a giant.
Monster Market! You burned it. You burned our claim. You think that saves you?
No one answered.
You're dead. All of you. The clerk, the little trader wolf, the leeches who shop here. You're all on our list now. Enjoy waiting for us.
He hit the doors again with something heavy, and the wards blazed. Then the pounding stopped. The howls faded. We heard engines rev. Tires crunched on broken glass. One by one, the bike sounds pulled away from the building and rolled off into the distance. The last engine cut off somewhere far down the street. Daniel exhaled hard. All right. Everyone stand down. Stay cautious, but stand down. They're gone for now. He hit the pedal for the lockdown. The recorded voice came back on, this time calmer. Lockdown disengaging. Please remain inside until staff direct you to exits. Thank you for your cooperation. The wards around the interior doors relaxed. The lights in the aisles brightened back to their normal cold wash. People shifted. Groans, low laughs, little curses. Cleanup started. People fetched mops, rags, patch kits for wards. The two witches moved along the walls, mending cracks in the spellwork. The ghoul and demon dragged wolf bodies towards the back to deal with later. I helped pull broken shelves upright and topple displays. It felt good to move. After a while, Daniel came over, envelope in hand. He looked older than he had at the start of the night. This is your pay, plus hazard. It ain't enough, but it's what I can do without bankrupting us. I took it. The weight felt good. If you want more runs with us, you've got a route whenever you need work. Grocery runs that bite back. I'll think about it. I left Monster Market through the side hatch they were using while someone figured out how to fix the front. The parking lot was empty. The night air felt good outside. My van sat where I left it. I slid into the driver's seat, set the envelope on the passenger side, and rested my hands on the wheel for a moment. This was supposed to be the easy job. Just groceries. Pick up boxes, drop them off, and enjoy the quiet. Instead, I watched a kid die, helped burn an ancient heart so no one could weaponize it, and stood inside a supermarket while a werewolf gang tried to tear it open. Still better than a demon in the sky. I started the engine. The van rumbled to life. There would be more calls. Nico would need something. The Coven would need something. Now Monster Market would too. The night shift had its routes. And I'll keep getting hired to drive them.